Welcome to the December 11th, 2012 meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have a roll call, please?
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
Jarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here. The flag Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Council Member Manukian and the invocation by Father Krikor Shaheen, St. Gregory's Armenian Catholic Church.
On this last meeting of the City Council for the year 2012, let's please join me in renewing our Pledge of Allegiance to our nation's flag. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation.
O Lord God, creator of earth and the vast universe and sustainer of all living things, we bring you our praise and worship this evening. We ask your forgiveness for wrongful actions motivated by our errors and short-sightedness. We pray that you would defeat selfishness within us as we seek the common good and fair stewardship of our community in the city of Glendale. We offer thanksgiving for this city council members so they may have wisdom to provide leadership to the citizens of the city of Glendale. We humbly ask your guidance upon each of the city council members for the decisions that they must make affecting many people. We acknowledge that whatever privilege you grant any of us is always accompanied by great responsibility. We pray for your guidance and leadership as we seek to alleviate the needs of those less fortunate than ourselves. We pray all this in the name of God, whom we believe is full of love and care, and who is vitally interested and involved in all that we do and say. Amen.
Mr. Clerk, may we have your report?
The agenda for the December 11th, 2012 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, December 6, 2012 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Next.
Next, under presentation and appointments, 3A is the agenda preview for the meetings of December 18th, 2012.
Ms. Spears.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for next week, for December 18th, we just have a Glendale Housing Authority meeting, which will commence at 3 p.m., and we have one business agenda item, Director of Community Services and Parks, and this is regarding the status update on the Youth Strategy Report. And as Councilmember Manukian said earlier, we will not be having council meetings until mid-January, and that will commence as of January 15th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next, please.
3B is the appointment of Ara A. Hatamian to the Civil Service Commission. This was the nomination of Councilmember Weaver.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Mr. Altamian for the Civil Service Commission. He did serve before, but is the policy of the council that when a new council member is elected, since your appointees serve at your discretion, he was removed and replaced with another person. He'd only served a year and a half. When I started to look for somebody, Mr. Hatamian came highly recommended by members of the staff for his excellent work on the Civil Service Commission. He does work for the Sheriff Department in the administration of disciplinary matters and making recommendations to executives regarding discipline and risk management. He's a senior instructor of legal studies at Platt College, and he's lived in Glendale for over 20 years. And I think that the highest recommendation I give to my colleagues is the recommendation of staff that have had to work with him in that year and a half. So that's my nomination.
Seconded.
Okay, I agree. He's very well respected, and he's served in the past and has an impeccable credentials. Roll call.
Council members: Friedman.
Yes.
Manukian.
Yes.
Jarian.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next, please.
3C is 30-year service award presentation to Robert Torres, Water System Equipment Operator for GWP.
All right. I have a service award, which reads 30-Year Service Award presented to Robert Torres. This certificate is an expression of sincere appreciation for 30 years of loyal and faithful service. May the future bring you a full measure of those endowments which long service and devotion to duty so richly deserve. And it's signed by myself and the city manager. In addition to that, beautiful box here. And most importantly, we have money. We have a shopping spree that we always give to the wife or the closest person. I'll let you do what you need to do with it, Robert, but
Better let him breathe the speak. It's the reason he's getting it for 30.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, and honored guests. I'm Mike Romanino. I'm the water superintendent in charge of construction, and I'm happy to be here today to help present Robert Torres with his 30-year service award. Robert began his employment with the city of Glendale in 1982 and is looking forward to a well-deserved retirement next year. In attendance today is Robert's wife, Rebecca, who recently retired from the city of Glendale with 27 years of service. His daughter, Christina, who worked for Glendale Parks and Recreation, is now a teacher for the Pasadena School District. His son, Robert, who currently works for the Glendale Water and Power Electric Division, and Robert Jr.'s wife, Erin, is also here. Please stand and be recognized. Robert started as a maintenance man in the Public Works Department in 1982. He promoted to street maintenance worker and then cement finisher. In 1997, he transferred to the Glendale Water Division as a heavy equipment operator. He earned his California Department of Public Health Water Distribution 1 certification and was promoted to Water System Equipment Operator. He continued his education and went on to achieve his Water Distribution 3 certificate. He proudly served 26 years in the National Guard from 1976 to 2002. During his service, he helped with the firefighting efforts in Northridge, California. He helped with firefighting efforts in Northern California. He assisted in the floods in Monterey. He assisted at the LA riots, and he assisted at the Northridge earthquake. Before retiring from the National Guard, his last mission was Operation Noble Eagle in Utah, where he was gone for a year as a result of the 9/11 attacks. Robert had much involvement in the construction of the Veterans Memorial here in Glendale and was the proud recipient of the Admiral Ben Bass Award. He's an avid outdoorsman. He's a member of the San Fernando Sportsman's Club and Fin and Feather Club. Me and my son have been fortunate enough to join Robert and his son on a few fishing and hunting trips. Robert is a hard worker and a great leader who leads by example, both on and off the job. All of us in the Water Division are better off because Robert is part of our team. Congratulations, Robert.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I have been very fortunate to be in a management position in the two departments that Robert has worked for. I know in '97 when he left, it was a huge loss for Public Works, and he's been a tremendous asset to the Water and Power Department. I've worked with his wife, Rebecca, up until her retirement my entire career, and in the quagmire that is finance, she could navigate anything. She was the go-to person. And I'm very fortunate to have Rebecca and Robert's son, Robert Jr., in Water and Power. And this young man is the future of Water and Power. And I'm very proud that he's with us. So in addition to all of your accomplishments, you've done a heck of a job as a father, I can tell you that. I won't tell the teddy bear story. But congratulations, well deserved, and thank you.
I would like to thank the people of Glendale. I would like to thank City Council, my family and friends, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, next, please.
Next is City Council and staff comments.
Ms. Friedman.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah, everybody. So I have a few things tonight. First of all, it's come to my attention that the City of Los Angeles has recently adopted, actually it's the County of Los Angeles, has adopted a motion that encourages cities to adopt an ordinance that exempts certain military veterans who have special license plates from having to pay parking meters. I would like to ask my colleagues to support me in agendizing this item. Basically, it would be the veterans who have qualified and gotten special license plates for Pearl Harbor survivor, Legion of Valor, former American prisoner of war, Congressional Medal of Honor, or the Purple Heart. So it's not all veterans, but it's veterans who have really proven themselves with really exemplary service, and I believe that it's the least we can do is to give them free parking at our parking meters. I would be very, proud as a city to have that on the books. So I would like to ask my colleagues if anybody would agree to discuss that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Great. Next today, several of us went on a tour of the renovations going on at the Brand Library. And it was really pretty amazing. Some of the walls have been removed to show windows, that let the light through from windows that have been blocked off for many years. The building's kind of gutted right now. There's a lot of work underway, but it's great to see how quickly and how much they're doing this renovation. Of course, our workers are doing a great job, and I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really a great addition to the community. Everybody knows and loves the Brand Library, and this just really makes the building even more usable for the community. So it's wonderful to see, and you should just know that that is all ongoing, full steam. Next, last week, I just wanted to mention a few events. I went to the groundbreaking for the what's known as the Triangle Project down in the south part of Glendale. Camden Properties is building an apartment building with a sort of commercial space on the bottom, right across from Glendale Memorial at the intersection of Brandon Central below Los Feliz. And you probably remember that used to be a car wash, and I think it was a Carl's Jr.?
Burger King.
Burger King, thank you. And I think that this is a much better gateway into our city than a Burger King. I have a friend who lives right across the street on the second floor of a building, and he's, of course, very impacted by the construction, and he's thrilled to see this coming in. He just thinks it's going to be such a better neighbor for him as a resident, as somebody who lives there, than a fast food restaurant and the car wash, which, even though it was a great car wash, it caused a lot of traffic. So it was nice to see that finally begin. On a sadder note, last week I went to a reception saying goodbye to the Glendale branch of the Glendale News Press. To save money, the Los Angeles Times is moving the Glendale News Press to their building downtown, into the LA Times building. So we're going to lose some of that presence of having the news press, having our local paper right here in our city. They did mention that they're thinking of starting an email letter writing campaign to the LA Times to let them stay in Glendale. So if they do that and get me an address, I will publicly announce it for anybody who wants to let the LA Times know that we'd like the news press to stay in Glendale, since it is the Glendale News Press. I attended with some of my colleagues the holiday party for the Jimenez Men Glendale Ararat chapter. They always do a great party, and they're so well supported in the community that it was just wonderful to see everyone come out to support them and all of the good work they do. I had the honor of being one of the MCs at the first time that the Arthritis Foundation has done a run walk here in Glendale. It was Sunday morning on Brand Boulevard. They very much used the similar route as the Downtown Dash. They had about 1,000 people show up, and all of the money, of course, goes to the Arthritis Foundation, so it's a great cause. And people came from all over the country, which I didn't realize. People had flown in from St. Louis, Missouri, and other places to support the foundation. So it was wonderful to expose Glendale to all of these people for the first time, and of course, very nice that we in Glendale could support this organization. So I hope that they come back again, and it seemed like a really good event. Lastly, I'd like to congratulate our Chief Assistant City Attorney. Is she still here? Well, maybe she's watching. Julian Van Meiden, who was named as one of the top 25 municipal attorneys in California or in the nation?
In California.
In California, but it might as well be the nation, by the Daily Journal. We're really proud to have her here. She does a great job, so I wanted to just publicly let people know she won that award and congratulate her. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Weaver, then Mr. Menuchyan.
Well, this is the last time I'll be able to address the city regarding the Glendale Rose Float, since we won't be here until January the 8th again. You can still sign up to work on the float. Last Saturday, I had approximately 135 students working on the float only in the morning, and a number in the afternoon, too. So if you want to, do it. A lot of kids seem to think it's fun. You get community service hours. I have them from 13 to 60, 70. There's no age limitation, except you're younger than 13 for liability reasons. We start at 9 in the morning, work till 5 o'clock before Christmas. Each Saturday after Christmas, we work from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night, depending on when I tell the crews to go home. We've never worked past 5 or 6 o'clock yet, and we're usually the first float done. So any of you have students, or you're a student listening to a council meeting, which I can't believe, I don't know why I'd be watching us. You can log on to, there's the rendering, it's Glendale Rose Float 2013.ivolunteer.com. We're totally computerized now, so I have a good idea the number of students I can expect for each week. I have at least 65 signed up for next week, for this coming Saturday already. The early birds get hot chocolate and donuts, so if you'd like to do it, fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Menuchyan.
Yes, I was again up in the Verdugo Mountains over the weekend, went up Audrey to the Brand Bench and then to the Verdugo Motorway, and I ran into over 25 individuals up there, including, I greeted them personally, including a Boy Scout troop that was kind of taking in the scenery up there. It was approximately 12 kids that were up there before, and I also participated in the trail safety program, which I wanted to talk about. Before I go there, I ran into 25 people, 6 mountain bikers, and 1 paw print with deer prints right next to it. So it was really interesting, and I took a picture of it. It was really interesting to see the paw print. It kind of gave me goosebumps, so I kind of rushed back down to the car and took off. But it just reminds us the wildlife that we have up there. And in the Chevy Chase area, we also had a sighting of a bear actually during this week. So I want to encourage everyone when they go up in the mountains or in the wild areas in the Verdugos or the San Rafael Hills to be careful and always be aware of your environment, and always when you go up there, please be safe and go up there with another individual, with a partner. I also want to talk about the trail safety program, and which we have training for this Saturday. I want to commend 17 people attended, both hiking and biking, trail safety individuals. 17 people participated, and it was a day-long affair. I want to commend everyone who attended with their will. There were individuals from Glendale and outside of Glendale. I want to commend every one of them for their commitment to this community and their willingness to contribute to the welfare and safety of those who use our trails and wilderness areas. There was a number of presentations in terms of procedures and first aid, and as you saw the pictures, it was very interesting. It was a very long day, and like I said, the pictures are self-explanatory. I also want to thank the Glendale Parks Foundation. They put up considerable amount of funds to make this program possible, the Trail Safety Patrol Program, in excess of $5,000. And I want to commend them and their commitment as well. I think they're doing a great service to this community. And I want to encourage everyone who is aware of Glendale Parks Foundation, they have annual fundraisers and events. And if there are individuals who are aware of these events and will make you aware as the year progresses, please participate and help out, because they help out on some of these very important programs for the city. So thank you to all who attended, and thank you to the Glendale Parks Foundation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Najarian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I went to an event this Friday evening that took me outside of the boundaries of Glendale, but it was well worth it. I traveled to the Hyatt Hotel in Long Beach, where I attended the Hasser Foundation. The Hasser Foundation is a foundation which funds scholarships to Latino students, and entirely funded by McDonald's restaurant owner-operators. In a short period of time, these folks pulled together and raised close to $500,000 in one evening. These scholarships are given to worthy students throughout the region, and their premier student, their keynote speaker, who received her several years of scholarship, graduated from Claremont McKenna, and she is now seeking a job at Disney. And I said, which Disney? Oh, Disney in Glendale. I said, way to go. I told her that we'd be very proud if she found a job in Disney. And again, kudos to a group that doesn't get a lot of attention outside the community, but the McDonald's owner-operators go a long way in making scholarships come true. They're part of the Ronald McDonald charity group, charity family. So it was very good, and congratulations to all the students that won and the owner-operators who contributed to their scholarships.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Najarian. I'll start with the Southern California Association of Governments, the SCAG, as it's called, had a summit, an economic summit, and that was very interesting. Multiple speakers, and basically looking for a way to market the region and looking for different alternatives and things that government can do to encourage business, and obviously working with labor. Then I also attended the Glendale Memorial Senior Holiday Lunch. Mr. Ochoa was also there, and that was a fun-filled event with lots of the seniors dancing, ballroom dancing. It was very well attended. Then Mr. Najarian, Mr. Manoukian, and I met with Ambassador Heffron, who's the American ambassador to Armenia. Very solid individual, very knowledgeable, and very productive meeting. On Sunday, I lit the menorah at the Galleria. The local Chabad chapter was there, and I've been doing it for a number of years, and it was also very well attended. And then they gave out free potato latkes and donuts, and the crowd was, we were encircled by people. And then finally, as was mentioned earlier, the Homenit Men fundraiser was quite good, and I want to thank Mr. Isakanian, who is generally the one that organizes and puts it together. Any comments from the staff? Okay, next please.
Next item is the consent items, including minutes. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting for consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
Okay, I have cards for 5C, 5D, and 5E.
Move the remainder of this consent calendar.
5D, I'm sorry, C, D, and E.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman.
Yes.
Manoukian.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. To read 5C into the record, please.
5C is Director of Public Works regarding funding of support staff for the San Fernando Valley North County Corridor Cities representative to the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board of Directors. C1 is a motion authorizing execution of a 5-year memorandum of understanding with the LA County MTA and 11 San Fernando Valley and North County Corridor Cities to fund the staff assistant position.
I have one card, Chinook Ramirez.
Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, everyone. I oppose the motion authorizing execution of a 5-year MOU with the LA County MTA and 11 San Fernando Valley and North County corridor cities to fund the staff assistant position because you have bilaterally failed your responsibilities to upkeep, maintain these buses, whether they are Metro, Beeline, Shuttle, LA Dash, trains, etc. You can't possibly hire a staff assistant position when the buses and trains are horrendously filthy and unsafe. Your cleaning outfits have not adequately kept the buses, trains, etc. free from all these contagious unsanitary diseases, i.e. MRSA, staph infections, scabies, hepatitis, meningitis, tuberculosis, which are highly contagious and lethal. And again, a lot of the Latinos and Hispanics and gangbangers don't cover their mouths when they upchuck or whatever. Squalling filth on the buses and trains, urine, feces, trash, litter, graffiti, vandalism, brawls on buses and trains, and worse than overcrowding, or when it's overcrowded. Incompetent Latino Hispanic bus drivers who can't speak English or nor evaluate potentially unsafe situations, and a failure to respond adequately in order to quell the potentially explosive scenarios involving bus and train passengers. First clean, disinfect, fumigate the bloody buses, trains, and all areas involving the transportation, whether it be in the city or the county. Then again, all will fall into place. You see, big kahunas, you don't speak out like you don't have the experience. And for many of us, we don't speak out of our asses. We live it in bones and flesh. And so, again, you've heard the old cliche, knowledge, again, experience is thus, the old experience is the best teacher, which gives knowledge of the subject matter, and thus you formulate a reasonable remedy. And for those of us who have lived the hell on buses, I'm proud to say I did it because, well, I couldn't buy a car because I got the gangbangers tailing me. Can you imagine having to deal with tampered car on a daily basis? I go buses, man. So, again, this is called common sense, which, again, your Glendale Police Department, i.e. Office Bateman, and your dispatchers and all of them lack. And, again, I'm asking you, put your priorities correctly. First, clean the bloody buses. And that way, one day you will not end up getting contagious diseases through a handshake or other means of reciprocation. But, again, you've got to clean the places before you hire up an assistant. And I would really appreciate it, not only I, but many of the tourists as well. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll move the item.
Second.
This is an $11,000 contribution to the...
Yes, that's our share for the next several years. Roll call.
Councilmembers Friedman,
Yes.
Menuchyan,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Please read 5D into the record.
Item D is Director of Public Works regarding fiscal year 2012-13 Americans with Disabilities Act curb ramp installation and sidewalk repair program. D1 is a motion awarding construction contract to Calvin Inc. in the amount of $799,335.50, approving $120,000 contingency and rejecting all other bids.
Have one card, Chinook Ramirez. I'm sorry, I have two cards, Chinook Ramirez, followed by Vargas Parsanian.
Thank you very much. When you award or deny a motion of construction, i.e. construction contract with Calban Incorporated, are you thoroughly investigating as a tool of accountability that this construction company is not illegally hiring criminal illegal aliens and Latino Hispanic gangbangers as cheap labor, thus performing a substandard shoddy job, which happens in nearly 100% of the construction cases all across America. And I've been dealing with that the last couple of weeks. Holy hell. Then the construction company hightails out of town and or evades any gross negligent responsibility, leaving the contractee or payer holding the bag with total substandard chaos, and then begins the emotional distress and torment. I say, hire, first and foremost, military. They know more about construction than these criminal illegal aliens and gangbangers. Please, use some common sense for crying out loud. Thank you.
Have a motion?
There's one more card.
Oh. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Vargas
Excuse me.
Parsanian.
Vargas Parsanian.
Good evening. My name is Vartkes Parsanyan, responsible manager of Vart Construction, Inc. Partly I'm owner of the Vart Construction. The rest of the ownership is with my wife. I'm a local contractor living in Glendale since 1988. I'm working with license in city of Glendale since 1992 and starting doing public work projects since 1995. And first project I did was Ethel Street. So later on I will explain how many projects I did for the city of Glendale, and I mean the city of Glendale knows me, Vart Construction. In that time it was Vart Construction only. Later on in 2008 it's Vart Construction Inc. We added just Inc. to be a partnership with my wife on that company. So in October 31st, there was a bid opening. I submitted my bid, and I was low bidder on this project, which is 2012 and 2013 ADA curb ramp and sidewalk repair program. So on this, my bid numbers here, I have the copy of my bid. The original is with the CD. On the last page, I just missed my corporate seal. I just missed it. But my name, my signature, my responsibilities, my license number, and although I have my corporate seal on 10% bid bond, you can check that. I put my seal on the bid bond, 10%, that I put it in my bid package. But on one spot, I missed it. So they say that because you missed that seal on your underneath of the signature, which is bid items. I mean, if there is no law in California that a corporate should put his seal underneath of his signature. I don't see any reason, but again, I missed it. I mean, I didn't do intentionally. I missed it to put the seal, but on bid bond, I didn't do that. I mean, it is in there. My corporate seal is on bid bond. So later on they say, oh, there are some other things also missing, which it says whoever is the low bidder, he has 3 to 5 days. I mean, it's standard. You have time to give more information if the city doesn't have. But come on, I am doing projects since 1995, and you all know me as a, I mean, I'm known as a Vart. Everybody calls my nickname Vart. They don't call me Vartkes, and they know me. So I spoke to the public work, even the engineering, all of them, they know, but the city attorney says, no, I mean, it's non-response bid.
Okay, thank you very much.
One more thing I say, the sign, the beautiful sign you see in that corner of northwest corner of the city hall, I built it by my own hands with 2 labor. Everything of that sign except the letters, which is stainless steel, which another business owner, which he is in Glendale also. I do business with, I'm first trying to, and I have 6 employees living in Glendale.
Okay, we've got the point. We understand what you're trying to tell us. Okay, that's it. The timers, have a seat. Mr. Zern?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, let me ask Assistant City Attorney Bobby Aldesco to come up, because he's the one that did the legal review and did the formal response, and he can go through in detail a little bit about what occurred and his findings.
Good evening.
Name for the record.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Bobby Aldesco. I'm a city attorney for the city of Glendale. Basically, what's happening with this, what happened here in this particular bid proposal is that not only was the corporate seal missing, but also the signature was missing from the bid proposal itself. There was a series of elements that were missing from the bid, which we deemed the bid to be non-responsive. In fact, staff deemed it to be non-responsive, and our office agreed. What was missing from the bid, other than the missing corporate seal, which would have lacked requisite authority to execute the bid itself, are the various things were omitted the following items: construction experience and present work commitments of the key individuals of the company's interstate experience rating modifier for the last 3 most recent years, safety performance, reports, and records for the last 3 years, which are requested of all primary contractors, and the portion and estimated dollar amount of the work to be completed by identified subcontractors. All these items are missing for the bid. Staff processes these bids in a very impartial manner. If a bid doesn't answer the elements of the bid that are requested, in this case, all these matters are very important to determine the qualification and the ability of the contractor to perform the work in the appropriate time for the appropriate cost. So when these items are missing from the bid, it's just a simple matter that the bid is deemed to be non-responsive. Because if we were to allow these omissions to go on, it would be, in effect, to be on the part of the city, be negligence to allow that, because we would be working with somebody who we don't really know. In this case, however, VAR Construction was the lowest bidder, and the type of bid, the bid errors did not really affect either the cost or the actual performance of the bid. To put it otherwise, basically the bid documents, the bid proposal did not give the bidder an advantage over other bidders where we would deem him to be automatically disqualified because we give him an unfair advantage. So in this case, he was the lowest bidder and didn't have an unfair advantage. So council could have has the ability, the authority, the discretion to award this contract to VAR Construction. However, staff doesn't have that authority because staff would have to go along with the impartial process. The concern here is that if staff were to allow these kind of errors to not affect the bid process, that the second lowest bidder would be entitled to sue the city and seek some kind of remedy for the cost of the bid performance when the second lowest bidder put a bid up, bid proposal.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, members of council, what we're saying here essentially is that the four corners of the bid response has to show not only that they're meeting all the material items required of the bid, but show the city and the public that this particular contractor has the experience and qualifications to do this particular work. And even though we may have worked with this particular contractor in the past, the four corners of the document essentially have to show that, and they don't in this case. And that's why our recommendation is essentially to uphold the determination and award the bid to the second lowest bidder, Calvin Inc.
Which is about 1% different from this bid.
Sure. There was a comment made by the gentleman saying that the normal procedure is to contact the company and ask them to rectify the situation, especially when it's dealing not with the pricing of it, but procedural items or signatures and things of that sort. And in his letter, it also says that he did provide the subcontractor. It just he's not planning on using subcontractors, so he's not required to provide that. Was he given? Is the process generally where you give him 3 to 5 days to fix what was these things, or is it automatically disqualified? You're out. That's it.
The process is to allow 3 to 5 days to form any corrections. If the corrections don't go to the very amount, the cost of the bid, if they don't give the bidder unfair advantage.
Which is this case. Basically, he's not going to change the price that he bid. He's just going to have signatures and additional references, basically, from what you read. That's what I understood.
That's correct. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened in this particular case in terms of staff discussing with him. It's my understanding the staff does that as a normal part of its business.
Okay.
But in this case, all these items were not rectified, and staff...
Okay, let me ask staff, was he given a couple of days to respond to some of these issues?
Let me ask our deputy director, city engineer, Mr. Galani, because his staff would have conducted that. But in normal procedures, we'll ask for certain clarifications. In this case, it's a signature that's not there. That's not a clarification. That's a signature that isn't there.
Well,
but let me ask.
On the bid document, he showed that there was a signature. Which signature was missing?
On the bid document, there was not the corporate seal and the signature. He had it on his bond, is what he is referring to. So the bond is a separate document.
No, he said there was a signature. There's just no corporate seal, but the signature. Rubik, you want-
Both were missing, actually. Both the
were missing?
corporate seal and the signature were missing from the place where you basically say, this is my bid. That stuff was missing there. And that's what
Okay,
happened.
was he given a couple of days to come inside and put the seal on? Even if it was, he's saying that the signature was not missing, so.
Give
Good
us your
evening.
name for the record.
Rubik Golanian, City Engineer. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Manukian, every contractor in a situation like this is given the opportunity to provide the missing information that's not material to the bid amount. However, the underlying more important issue was the missing corporate seal that we don't ask for after the bids are open. So they need to be submitted with the bid.
So they can't come in and say, here's my seal?
Unfortunately not.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Manukin, if I can add to that, and we've tightened this up. What we've had in the past, and I'm not accusing Spark Construction of this at all, but what we've had is in cases where signatures were left off, or seals weren't put on, or a bid amount wasn't put in, it leaves the contractor an out to say if they have a low bid or lower than they expect, a way to get out of the bid. And they've gotten out of those, and we've gone to much higher bids. So in order to try to tighten that up, make it as fair and equitable as possible, we're requiring that all the information be provided. And where we can get a clarification, where we say, this looks like a 4, is it a 4 or an 8 kind of thing? And that's a simplified example. But in the case where you leave out information like the corporate seal and the signature, we begin to worry that that's a situation where the next lowest bidder will come in and go, well, I completed my document exactly the way you asked me, and they didn't, and now we have a reverse situation.
Well, was the signature left out or just a seal? I mean, he's saying that only the seal was left out. He's got a copy of it saying the signature was on it.
My understanding, it was the signature and the seal, and that's what I believe is Mr. Galanian and Mr. Aldesco's, unless I'm wrong.
Actually, Councilmember Manukian, the signature is on that page, but the corporate seal is missing,
Oh, it's just the
attesting
seal.
the signature.
So the seal is missing, not the signature.
Kind of like having a notary, and you ask that certain documents be notarized so that they can be enforceable. You don't have any issue whether or not the contract was signed legitimately. And that's the reason why we require, and that's something we have never, since we've instituted this, we've never waived, and I would recommend it.
In all my years of service, I really don't see this corporate seals used any way, shape, or form. They're basically kept in the corporate binders and forgotten about. So,
Public Works bids are a little bit different,
Very-
heavily regulated in California code. And I think Mr. Zern's point is the point that we, however empathetically or even reluctantly, would cling to, is that in that instance where we do receive a bid and it is not the bid that is in complete compliance with the bid requirement, that bidder has the opportunity to then back away. And when that happens, in another bid, mind you, that could happen in another circumstance, I think what we're concerned about is the sanctity of the process, the consistency of the process, to be able to say, you have to actually submit it and do it the right way. But as was indicated previously, council gets to make the decision ultimately.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Weaver, then Mr. Najarian.
during my career, I attended countless bid openings. I can remember once where all the bids had to be in by a certain hour on the mark. And the person running the bid opening was sitting there looking at the clock. Get ticked. Person came in half a minute, 1 minute late on multi-million-dollar projects, thrown out. You had to be there at that time. And then if any bids weren't totally complete, out, because of the fact the next low bidder is going to sue you. I did what I was supposed to do. Now you're letting this guy get by because he didn't do this. It doesn't matter. You start down the slippery slope, unfortunately, of allowing one to neglect this and that, and the next time there'll be another situation. You just can't, not on bid opening. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that is a stringent rule.
Mr. Najarian.
Couple comments. The corporate seal is I think, overrated in terms of its force and effect. It's many times just a crackerjack type of mechanism where should you not even apply the proper amount of force, you may believe that you have sealed a document, imprinted it on the paper itself. So let's not get caught up with the corporate seal. It is not like a notary seal. I mean, I think that's an analogy that is not comparable. I don't know if we got an answer to the question as to whether the individual signed the document or not, or whether he did sign it, but no corporate seal. Is that what we have?
Yes, Councilmember Najarian, yes, he did sign it.
So how do we know that in all good faith he didn't attempt to apply his corporate seal? Maybe his wife tried to do that, and she didn't have the arm strength. That's not as easy to do as it looks like. You've got to really crack down on it. And for that reason, this bid should be tossed to the wayside?
Well, if I may, this is one of many reasons why the bid was rejected as non-responsive, including failure to submit material information pertaining to the contractor's qualifications to do the work, which is, when taken together, I think is why our office is recommending that the bid, as staff had, that the bid be rejected, and that the next responsible bidder be the bidder that's awarded this contract.
Okay. Is there a protest period that's available for this, or has that expired? We have a bid protest period, I'm sure.
The bid protest for the lowest bidder, you mean?
Yes.
Not in this kind of situation, because this
he can't protest.
Well, he can protest with the staff. There is no particular, it's a reasonable time. Would be a matter of 3 to 5 days. He's already protested. In fact, to staff, he's expressed his concerns, and staff responded to him. In fact, we sent him a couple of letters on this matter. It's really the totality of these missing elements that render the bid for staff, non-responsive. If staff were to just simply overlook those items, it would have to overlook the same kind of items for every contractor. It would be making a arbitrary and capricious decision to do so simply on the basis of their acquaintance with Mr. Vargas. And I think that's the problem at the staff level, because, there would be a protest definitely from the second lowest bidder if this information was...
What was the other problem? What was the other problem you said?
Well, there are several problems. The problems were the following. They failed to identify all the projects completed by the company in the past 5 years, omitting the name of the project, the owner's phone number, contract number, amount, date of completion, percentage of cost work completed, as requested by the city's request for the bids. They omitted the following items: the construction experience, present work commitments, which is very crucial to know whether the person can finish the work on time. What are the key individuals in the company's interstate experience for the 3 most recent years, the safety performance reports, records with OSHA for the last 3 years, which are requested of all primary contractors. The portion and estimated dollar amount of the work to be completed by identified subcontractors, which is a very essential element. In fact, for all bids, if you fail to mention that itself is non-responsive, because we don't know who will be performing the work. It could be it just goes to other people that are not really mentioned. And the information for the subcontractor wasn't really provided either. Who is a subcontractor? Who is this person? So taken together, for staff to just simply say, oh, it's VART, we'll just overlook it this time, it would mean that it would have to do so for the next 50 guys that come along and say, well, I made a mistake too. You should be looking at my thing. But again, these are they don't go to the costs, and they don't go to the performance itself. And VART is the lowest bidder. And for that reason,
That's a good thing.
Yes.
We like to save money in Glendale.
What's the difference between the next lowest bid?
0.25%.
How much?
$2,000.
$1,900, which is why I think the next lowest bidder would likely come in and say, wait a second, there's a process that's set out in law, that's set out in prior to the entire bid coming in, and I did it exactly as you asked. And I understand your point, and I even understand Mr. Parsinian's point that he has done work for us, we've been satisfied with that work, but that previous experience doesn't necessarily level the playing field for omissions within the bid, I think is all that the staff position is. Because, as Mr. Aldesco points out, we do have concerns about what it means going forward. Well, we know you, or you're a local business thus, or, fill in the blank on the rationale.
Was this bid open to the entire construction community or to a pre-qualified set of bidders? This was not pre-qualified, because to me, that would make a difference.
Right.
Okay, but if it's not, it's not. The corporate seal issue doesn't fly with me. However, some of the other things that you mentioned, I think, are material.
If it was only
in
the
my
corporate
mind.
seal itself, we would have said, there are cases on this point. If it's just simply the corporate seal, that itself is not make it or break it.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Najarian. The corporate seal, while important and so forth, isn't to me material, but the other things that were left out from OSHA and all the rest of it, that's too much. And it's too close to the winning bid, $1,900. So to have a motion, D1?
Make the motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Menuchyan,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Would you read 5E into the record?
5E is Director of Administrative Services Finance regarding development impact fees revenue collected pursuant to ordinance number 5575 and expenditures by capital improvements for fiscal year 2011-12 ending June 30th, 2012. E1 is a motion to note and file report.
Herbert Milano.
Good evening, Mayor Quintero, members of the City Council and staff. My name is Herbert Molano. This particular item deals with a report concerning the use of the development impact fees. In the report, there is it is separated items having to do with a park mitigation fee, library mitigation fee, and Quimby fee. I personally am confused slightly with regard to separating the Quimby fee. I thought that the park mitigation was a Quimby fee. The Quimby fees, according to the state law, says in some California communities, the acreage fee can get very high. Let me rephrase this. The Act was designated to ensure adequate open space acreage in jurisdiction adopting Quimby Act standards. For example, 3 to 5 acres per 1,000 residents. I would like to ask the following, first a clarification on that, and then as well to ask if the city is keeping records of the collection of these Quimby fees or park impact fees relative to the places where the construction is taking place. I have looked at and requested from a Public Records Act information as to where some of the fees have gone or have been authorized. And it is my contention, and it is my claim, that it appears as if the city is using many of these fees or assigning them to areas where the impact fees are not, where the impacts are not being, or to the areas where they're not being impacted. For example, recreational planning area 10, where City Hall is, and the area all the way to Glendale Boulevard between Broadway and between Brand and roughly Adams, has about 32,000 residents, hasn't had a single inch of parkland put in, and we have a deficiency or a park assignment of about 0.02 acres per 1,000. We're far off from anywhere near 3, 5, or 6 acres per 1,000 as some of the standards are. So I was wondering, when these reports are created, do we have an evaluation as to how these impact fees are being assigned, not only historically but in the future, whether the areas that have been severely impacted by the high-density buildings, and we have many huge buildings being created in South Glendale, whether those park impact fees will be assigned to those areas, and are they being concentrated in the areas that are most efficient? I would like to have, perhaps, if the council permits, an answer to those two questions.
I can, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I could probably answer some of them, but maybe not all of them. With respect to the Quimby fee and the park development or the development impact fee, they are two different fees. The Quimby fee is a fee that we can charge on residential subdivisions, so that includes condominium development. And the park impact fee is a fee that we charge on the issuance of a building permit for multifamily or commercial. So a developer of a condominium development has the option to pay either the Quimby fee or the or the impact fee. And they're roughly the same, I think, and it depends on when they want to pay the fee. If they want to pay it when they pull their permit, or if maybe they want to pay it later. So, with respect to the Quimby fee, there is a provision of the government code which says that those fees have to be used to serve the residents of the subdivision. So there does have to be some nexus between the use of those fees and the projects upon which they're charged, and that can be done in a number of different ways. If, for example, those Quimby fees, in our view, could be used for any of the city's parks that are citywide parks or regional parks that serve the entire population of the city. But they could not be used, for example, for a neighborhood park in an area that is not close to the subdivision for which it was charged. So, for example, I'm trying to think which project down there. I think ISIS maybe was charged the Quimby fee. That project, those funds would have to be used in close proximity to that particular project. So that's the only, and I don't know with respect to how much reports we have, how many reports we have currently. I'm not sure. Although I do know that each time we go to spend those Quimby fees, park staff and finance staff and our staff get together to make sure that we can make the finding that Quimby fee is being used to serve the residents of a particular project.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. There are no cards for oral communications,
There are not for the 3-minute portion.
right? Could you
Next
read?
items on the agenda at 8A under action items is Director of Information Services and Public Works regarding telephone and network cable services to replace the wiring in the Municipal Services Building. 8A1 is a motion authorizing execution of Amendment Number 1 to the Professional Services Agreement with Veterans Communication Services, Inc. in an amount of $199,662. 8A2 is a resolution appropriating $242,482 for funding of the Professional Services Agreement.
Have a motion?
Move 8A1.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes.
A2?
Oh, yes, yeah, 8A2. Yeah, should be separate anyhow. 8A2.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next.
AP is Director of Human Resources regarding establishment of classification titles and compensation for employees of the City of Glendale. At B1 is a resolution establishing GCEA and GCEA confidential classifications. B2 is a resolution establishing GMA and GMA exempt classifications.
Have one card, Chinook Ramirez.
Again, thank you very much, Mayor. The Director of Human Resources regarding establishment of classification, titles, and compensation for employees of the City of Glendale. First, I would fire the Director of Human Resources and fire 99.9% of your Glendale Police Department so-called officers, i.e. Bateman, Vidal, Quintero, Shine, and the dispatchers, among others, who aren't really in the mindset of policing as decent, reasonable cops would. But what these so-called Glendale PD officers are doing is inciting vigilantism by Latino, Hispanic gangbangers against legal law-abiding citizens and sanctioned by the Glendale Police Department. What they have done is violated and abused their badge under the color of authority. Therefore, they have misrepresented their title, the city, and themselves, for they are dirty, rogue, vengeful bullies. Replace 99.9% of these Glendale police with military veterans, and you will see the city cleaned up and back to full functioning civility, decency, orderly, civil obedience at full throttle. So again, first and foremost, hire military veterans. They have tactfulness, professionalism, and elegance, and they exude objectivity. That's the great, and they've got a whirlpool of humanity. You can't ask for more. Thank you so much.
Be happy to move 8B1 and 2.
Second. I would like, actually, because this is important, it's savings to the city, I'd like to have a short briefing as to what this is.
Yes, sir. In light of the restructuring that we did in this current fiscal year, where we dropped from, I believe, 842 full-time positions to, at this point, pending the disposition of the GWP reorganization, we're down to 1,575 full-time equivalent positions. We do have before you, as we do periodically, the reclassification and adjusted compensation ranges for a handful of different positions and series. So, for example, I think the most noteworthy one that speaks to a different way of doing business, different way of policing and saving some money, is to civilianize a division commander position within the police department for those services that don't require a sworn safety personnel. And at the same time create a business series within the police department that we can remove sworn officers and sworn personnel from handling rather mundane, everyday administrative types of duties. So things like that where we're restructuring the organization seem to make the most sense for us. You'll see that carry through in HR.
That will save us how much annually by restructuring that position?
At this point, sir, I don't know, but
It says 75,000 in here.
Yeah, that's between all-in number, that would be appropriate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Council members: Friedman.
Yes.
Menuchyan.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next.
Next is Director of Finance at Director of Administrative Services and Finance regarding report on the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report CAFR of the City of Glendale for June 30th, 2012. And C1 is a motion accepting the CAFR, and C2 is a motion accepting the single audit report.
Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. It is that time of the year where we present the CAFR for the fiscal year that had just ended, in this case, June 30th, 2012. This is our standard report, but I would submit to you, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Elliott to walk through the details of the CAFR, that we, I believe, are going on 17 years of recognition for the outstanding work contained within the CAFR, and I can tell you that that is being refined even further through what is called the popular CAFR, taking this information, which can be quite complex, distilling it down to a much more readable format, and ultimately, when that's finished, we'll have that up on the web. But something that we take a great deal of pride in, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Elliott at this point.
Thanks, Scott. Excuse me. Thanks, Scott. Good afternoon. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's my pleasure to present tonight the comprehensive annual financial report for your acceptance. What we want to do is much like we've done in the past, is go through an overview of the structure of the CAFR. I'll introduce representatives from McGladrey, your auditor for the city, Jeff Altshuler, who's the partner, and Peter George, the director. And we'll touch on some of the key deliverables, obviously the opinion, which again was unqualified, which is the highest we can obtain, the management letter, and ultimately the single audit report. Towards the end of the PowerPoint, I will invite them up and you can ask questions if you like. So again, one of the issues that we've discussed in the past, and I just want to reiterate the timing that goes into this. We start the audit in early June is the process. The auditors come in and do the pre-closing field work. Takes a couple of weeks typically. They'll go through and get a list of items they want to confirm with outside third parties to make sure that the numbers we represent are confirmed by outside evidence. So they'll start that. We work through the end of April. Ultimately, they come back in September to start the field work. They'll go through and do a lot of test work. They'll talk with the internal audit department, review all the reports that are issued through the year and any areas of risk that have come up. They'll look through that and rely on that to the extent that they want to. They'll continue to go through. We'll do a draft CAFR, and they'll go through all their research and review of the numbers and back up their work papers, ultimately to make sure that everything we put through in the CAFRs in the correct format. Everything is according to GAAP, and then we ultimately will publish the CAFR as you see Actually just got it printed last week. One correction I will note, we had done these PowerPoints prior to getting the actual opinion letter, that this should read December 4th is what the opinion is dated, and that's there's reasons for that. And again, we're bringing it to you tonight. So it's a pretty packed 5 or 6 months of activity. A lot of work goes in. I'd like to thank my staff, especially Lily Fong, who leads up this effort, and all the accounting supervisors and accountants that put in a lot of late evenings going through and putting these numbers together. To go through the CAFR structure again, it's kind of a top-down structure. Starts off with the transmittal letter, obviously lists the organizational structure of the city. Then we dive into the financial sections, again, very top-down, includes the independent auditor's report. There's a section called the MD&A, Management Discussion and Analysis, which is really the executive summary, has a lot of highlights and information about the city for the reader of the statements. From that point, it gets into the core financial statements. And much like a consolidated financial statement, we have what is known as the entity-wide. And this was what GASB 34, which was almost a complete rewrite of governmental accounting about 10 years ago, to make it more similar to corporate accounting. So we have what we call the entity-wide, again, a consolidated financial that breaks it into two categories, which are governmental type and business type activities. Business type being the enterprise funds, and then governmental, all what you would consider the core governmental functions, the general funds, special revenue funds, etc. From that, we then go back to a more traditional look at a finer level, at the fund level, and we break it up to what's known as major funds. Those are the significant activities of the city. General fund, by definition, is always a major fund, and then by determination of a formula, the larger funds, we go through this test to come up with what the ultimately becomes known as a major fund, and it's based on size and either percent of assets or liabilities or combination thereof. Everything else is then categorized as a non-major fund. One thing I'll note, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, is we now have a fiduciary fund. And a fiduciary fund is basically not in necessarily the umbrella of the city. It's where we moved all the former redevelopment assets of the successor agency is now in a fiduciary fund. So in a sense, this was a transition year where we pulled out all the redevelopment activity, all the funds, and if you look through the CAFR, you'll see that we started with balances at the end of the year. They were all zeroed out. All that activity is now in the Glendale successor agency, which is in a fiduciary fund type. And lastly, then we go into the non-major, within the report, the non-major funds and the enterprise funds, the internal service funds, which are where we have our insurance fund, our workers' compensation fund, all those funds that we basically use to house certain costs and then charge back to the user departments, a way of identifying and controlling costs for internal use. And lastly, the statistical section, which we don't usually talk much about, but this year I thought I'd go through what those are because there is a lot of trend information in there. So just in a quick overview on the entity-wide, there's two core statements. The statement of net assets, which for lack of a better is really the balance sheet of the entire city. And this is stated in millions, so you can see at the end.
Very simplified, I would say.
Very simplified. Okay. So we have the assets of the government, liabilities of the governmental activities with net assets of $947 million, and the business activities at $899 million in assets, the corresponding liabilities, and then the net assets. Combined, there's about $1.6 billion in assets for the city.
These include the funded pension and medical?
They do not. They do not, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, you can even ask the auditors about that. They probably give a better answer. So just to go through it in Statement A2, which is the statement of activity, for easier nomenclature would be the income statement. Again, broken out in government and business categories, and showing what the total revenues and expenditures are, again, coming back down to that $1.6 billion for total net assets as of June 30th, 2012. Some of the information that's included in the CAFR, of course, is the outstanding bonds, and wanted to go through those because there is a lot of talk about outstanding debt, so just to be upfront. And then there's a big differences this year because, as you notice, within the governmental activities, really the only debt left after the redevelopment agency has been removed is the certificates of participation that are outstanding for the police department building. Along with that are some of the loans and leases that we have in addition to that. Business type activities, again, primarily GWP are the electric and water bonds, and the total there, the combined total of the both governmental and business type activities, bonded debt outstanding at June 12th is $381 million. Relatively low for an organization this size. Items that we pulled out, which are now within the fiduciary fund, the former redevelopment agency, or now the successor agency, is all the former redevelopment tax allocation bonds are $148 million, roughly $150 million as of the end of June. That is now an obligation of the successor agency. So we talked about the fiduciary funds again. That had a big impact in rearranging how we portray the CAFR now. That's all been extracted from the city umbrella, as it were, but it's still included within the fiduciary funds. One other change is now, because we've reshuffled everything, the Housing Assistance Fund is now considered a major fund because of the redevelopment agency moving off. Mentioned it a little bit earlier and wanted to just highlight some of the information that's kept in the back of the CAFR and the statistical information. There's a lot of schedules. There's 21. There's broken down into different types of categories and financial trends. All of these tables here have 10 years worth of data included in the background. There's also revenue capacity, which have a lot of variety of different information. Most of these have 10 years worth of information. Some of them compare the latest information we have. For example, Schedule 7, which is the principal electrical payers. We have a number of those tables that compare the current year, 2012, to the latest, the oldest year that we have in terms of information, which is 2006 in this case. And that goes the same for Schedule 10, the principal property taxpayers. And it's just really to see what the mix was as far back as we have to what the mix is today. We also have a category of schedules that show the debt capacity. That has all the different debt from the various agencies within the city. It has the legal debt margin, pledge revenue coverage for a variety of different tables. Most of these are 10 years. I take that back. The 13 and 14 schedules are the current year, and the other two are 10 years worth of data. We also have demographic and economic information. Again, one is 10 years, and the other principal employers, again, is a 2-year look, 2012 versus 2006. And then we have some operation information, salaried positions, operation indicators by programs, how much did we spend on safety or public works, that type of thing, and then again for capital assets as well. So that's the overview of the CAFR and all the schedules. The management letter is basically the report card that we get from the auditors. We had no observations this year, so basically we got a good report card from the auditors. If you recall, in the past we have had observations for improvements in terms of how internal service funds were done or deficits that we may have had. And the last thing that we touch on is the single audit report, which is the separate report in the blue binder that you receive. And that's basically to be in compliance with the OMB 133, which is the federal guidelines and the rules of which we account for that and then report back to all the federal agencies for all the federal grants that we have. And this year, for 11-12, it was about $52 million in federal grants. And to keep in compliance with all those, whether it would be a Homeland Security grant or a housing grant, Section 8, you name it. All those are covered in that single audit report to make sure that we comply with our reporting requirements for those. Again, no observation from the auditors and how those were done. So from my perspective, it was a good year. It was a tough year trying to take in all the changes of the redevelopment agency and the accounting that had to go with it. We were waiting for quite some time. There was, as I think we mentioned in the report, a white paper that was issued from the CCMA, which is the California Committee on Municipal Accounting, which was a combination of industry, GASB folks that got together to issue guidance on how do we account for the dissolution of the redevelopment agency. So we followed that guidance, and hence why we have the fiduciary fund with the successor agency in it. So with that, I will invite Jeff and or Peter up to the podium if you have questions for them.
Mr. Manukian.
I have questions from the auditors.
We'll need your names for the record.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Jeff Altschuler. I'm an audit partner with McGladrey.
And I am Peter George. I'm an audit director with McGladrey.
Were there any, thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Before I go into the questions, were there any disagreements in terms of accounting procedures, whether generally accepted or governmental accounting, that were not material but were discussed with staff and a conclusion was reached regarding these issues?
There were no disagreements.
There were no disagreements in terms of the accounting procedures that were used?
No. There was obviously discussion throughout the entire audit process, but no disagreements with any of the procedures that we wanted to do with them.
Any issues that were not material in terms of internal controls that you might have come across that might not necessarily be reported?
Right. There's three types of deficiencies in internal control. There's the most material are the material weaknesses. Then we have significant deficiencies, and then the basic are the control deficiencies. We did not identify anything that were considered material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. As far as control deficiencies go, we have an option to discuss those verbally with management and with council and the audit committee, which we'll be doing with the audit committee next month. But from the results of the audit, there was a couple of adjustments that were identified by us relating to the capitalized interest and depreciation with the Glendale Water and Power funds, the electric and water funds, which resulted from just a cleanup of items or projects that were in the construction and process accounts that were moved to its respectable buckets, whether they're depreciable. So that resulted in a couple of entries during the closing process that management incorporated, but no disagreements or anything we would consider to be material deficiencies in internal control.
And those adjustments did not have a significant effect on the city's financial statement.
There's been an ongoing discussion in the community regarding electric fund or transfers and how those transfers are treated. The question is whether those transfers come out of the reserve fund or the surplus funds, as it's called in the charter, or whether it comes of operations. Does it make a difference, in your opinion, how you look at those funds and how you rate it?
As far as how we look at those funds and the transfer, I mean, we do look at to the charter to define what exactly the transfer is. And under accounting principles, there's 4 types of transactions that can take place between funds. And one of them is a transfer of funds. That's defined in generally accepted accounting principles. So it doesn't meet the criteria of the other 3 types of transactions, which is interfund receivables and payables, which means they're going to be due back.
Right.
It's not a reimbursement of services. So it's treated in the financial statements as another financing source in use, which is a transfer of assets.
So that's why it's written out of the operations and not, it's okay to be transferred out of the operations as an expense or as an outflow of funds as opposed to having those funds be in the surplus and transferring it out of the surplus?
Right, exactly.
Would you have a problem if those funds were transferred out of the surplus as opposed to the outflow operations?
Well, the fund is defined by generally accepted accounting principles. What is a fund? And the electric fund, the water funds, all the funds of the city meet those definitions, and we do go through an annual basis to determine if these funds are appropriately designed to be, whether they're general funds, special revenue funds, debt service funds, enterprise funds.
Okay, the question is whether the electric surplus fund is part of the electric fund and whether it transfers out of, whether it's the electric operations fund or the surplus funds, does it make a difference?
Not from an accounting standpoint, no.
Okay.
Part of the electric fund from an operating activities standpoint.
That is the point that I was trying to make early on in our discussions. The other question is the unfunded liabilities that is not reflected. Could you tell us why it's not reflected?
Generally accepted accounting principles on a GASB basis currently do not require any government, including city governments, to record those unfunded liabilities on the financial statements. There is a GASB that has been issued within the last 12 months that will be effective in 2015 regarding unfunded pension liabilities. So the city has 3 more years before they implement that. There really wasn't an option to even implement that this year because they're still going through, the AICPA is still going through an implementation guide to figure out how to implement that standard, and CalPERS has not updated its systems to actually give you the information you would need to update that through your balance sheet date. And so right now there's only a disclosure requirement, and that's been in effect for years, and the city does disclose in its footnotes what the unfunded liability is for pensions and for OPEBs. Also, GASB is working on another standard regarding the OPEB unfunded liability. They have not issued that yet, but we're all expecting and waiting with bated breath in the next 12 to 24 months when they issue that standard so that pensions and OPEBs will also be recorded on the books within the next 5 years or so.
I was going to look for the unfunded liabilities in the financial statement section, and
Page 97.
I went directly to the last page, and there it was.
Yep.
So if anyone's interested, don't you think that there's a significant amount of exposure that I know that you're not required to include in the financials, the balance sheet, or any of the other statements, but don't you think it's significant enough where it should be more than a footnote or more than a note?
And I think that's why GASB has actually issued statements so that all governments will put those on their financial statements. So yeah, it's a significant number, and it is disclosed, and so it should be taking into consideration when you do your operations within the city, and I'm sure that you are.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Very welcome. I also want to thank Mr. Elliott and Lily Fong and the whole staff actually at the city for helping us get this audit out on time again, and for all the hard work. As Bob said, there was a lot of late nights here on both sides versus the auditors and the auditee, and we really do
That's
appreciate
normal
it.
for auditors, so it's...
We love it.
Is that overtime reflected in the CAFR?
Yeah, we're just not used to seeing our counterparts working the late hours we work, but the city is, I mean, of all the cities I've been involved in over the 18 years I've been in public accounting, this is the only one that I see that would actually stay till 7:30 at night with us. So I wanted to thank the staff for working closely with us through the night. It's not an easy
Very
document.
good. In case the public didn't hear it, so in 18 years of doing these type of audits, rarely have accountants stayed up with you to complete the work. That's pretty much what you said, right? Okay.
Thank you very much.
I would like to request actually from staff to, as you usually do, provide the CAFR in an electronic format.
It's on the web.
You give me a CD usually.
Oh, sure.
I don't have it this year, but if you could give it, I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have one card, Herbert Milano.
Mayor Quintero, I was wondering, this being one of the most important documents, may I have 4 minutes?
This being what your life is all about, sure, I'll give you 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor Quintero. My name is Herbert Milano, City Council and staff. I want to present the following opinions with regard to a couple of things that were mentioned today. First one is with regard to the certificate of excellence that appears on the financial statements. Now, this is not a disparaging remark with all the effort that was done by the Finance Department and the auditors. I just want to put it in perspective. Nearly every city that submits this document gets a certificate of excellence, including the city of Bell. Every year during the whole debacle, they got a certificate of excellence. And when I call them up as to how they do it, they pretty much spend 2 hours on every document to just see if it follows the same format. But auditors, and especially national auditors like McLaren and Poland, follow certain standards. You're going to get the same type of structure report no matter where in the world. In the United States, you get it. And I think it's money wasted and it's a misrepresentation because it leads us to believe that there is more to this excellence than what is already provided by the auditors. Now, I would like to present the following things. We had presented, and I presented at the audit committee, the issues concerning how it is my belief that the auditors should be looking at transactions done by the city that may be a violation of state constitution or state law. For example, the issues having to do with Proposition 218 and the transfers that were made out of the water fund that were in violation of that, or that we assume are in violation of that, or that the city acknowledged. The same thing has to do with violation of the city charter. The specific statements made in the charter prohibiting basically those transfers, and the city continuing to do this. Because it creates a risk potential that if the city is sued with regard to violation of its own charter, and it has to refund those monies back to the utility, then the financial state, or should we say the general fund, would be severely impacted by it. And I think that those are issues that an auditor should be able to take. Second issue I want to bring up is with regard to comparative information. Even though we have the statistical analysis at the back of the CAFR, I still believe that many of the other reports, the audited portion of it, should contain comparative reports similar to what you find in the management discussion and analysis. Because by looking at the very same type of accounts or funds side by side will allow you and the public to see any major changes that may have transpired. In this year's management discussion and analysis, when we look, for example, at the year-to-year changes in the overall long-term debt, we don't see it included the portions that were basically moved out of this report that had to do with the redevelopment agency. I think we should be able to see what redevelopment agency had before and then what it has now, and basically look at those differences. I also like to make a suggestion concerning tying this type of report to some kind of financial performance report. We have the financial reports, but we don't have it coming out with a performance evaluation of the departments. Because if we were to look at the percentage of the general fund that fire and police make up, and if you follow it throughout the years, especially the last 10 years, a larger and larger portion of the general fund are being taken up by police and fire expenditures. And I think that it is crucial for us to evaluate and perhaps even forecast that in future years you probably have no money for anything else except fire and police and the retirement pension. The last item, I'm running out of time. Well, I'll probably discuss it next year sometime. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Weaver.
I'd like to ask the auditors a question or two. To your knowledge, does just about every city get one of these excellent reports? To your knowledge, or do you know?
Does every city?
No.
Not every city.
Just about every city gets it, even Bell. You think that's a kind of a true statement? Or?
The process to go through that is a very subjective process. Every city will, if they want to submit their CAFR for an award, there is a criteria checklist, if you will, of things that needs to be included in that CAFR document for it to be considered for an award. But it doesn't really get into the depth of the quality and the breadth of the disclosures, the accounting principles, but they're looking for certain disclosures, certain format presentations, that type of thing. So as long as all those cities meet those criteria, then it would be considered for an award. And the way the process works is there's a list of, I guess, professionals that are doing this on a volunteering basis. So it depends on who gets the CAFR document and reviews it. You'll get some that are more critical than others. You'll get some that will just maybe spend a few minutes and, thumb through it and then, have their suggestion whether it should be submitted. So it's a very subjective process. Each entity that does submit that award or that document for an award will get a list of suggestions for improvement on the next year's CAFR, and that is a document that goes along with the CAFR for submission to the next year's award. So it just depends on.
Yeah. It'd be nice if every city could get it.
But not every city gets it.
Okay, and the other question, did you do all of this work in a couple days?
No. The process, if you have a
They
few
would have
minutes.
liked to.
Yeah.
Now, the process is really a time-involved process. We do start, as Bob mentioned earlier in his presentation, we do start in early June for about 2 weeks to come out and really focus on the controls in place here at the city. It's a really in-depth process. We start with the entity-wide controls, and this is basically how every department works with the finance department and how the city manager's office and the finance department works with the city council. You know, what kind of reports are being communicated, the information being included. We do go through the minutes on a weekly basis to see exactly how detailed this information is. If we feel that the way the controls are designed as they should be and are effectively working, we can then go into a much more detailed analysis and understanding of the major transaction cycles. So we look at the budgetary process here, we look at the revenue process, we look at your procurement process, your disbursements process, your payroll process, your debt process, your investment process, your risk management process. And for just about every one of those major transaction cycles, we not only understand and document how the controls work to get from basically the origination of the transaction to the reporting in the CAFR, but we do test on a sample basis the controls of those major transaction cycles. And if we don't find any deviations in the way those controls work, then when we come back out in middle September, and it does take about 2.5 months for us to come back out, because a lot of the information that does get put into that CAFR is coming from estimates that require actuaries and other consultants to basically get time to get the information and put together their report. So your workers' compensation, general liability numbers come from your actuaries. They take about 2 months to get that report, and then the city has to get that information, review it, approve it, and then incorporate it into their year-end close. Your pension and OPEB information comes from CalPERS and other actuaries. Usually that doesn't come out till early October, middle of October, so that's one of the last things we have to wait on to get that information. So there's a lot of things we have to do. We have to wait on before the city says, yes, we're ready for you to come out and do your audit. We do come out in the middle of September. One of the first things we'll do is work on the compliance report, the single audit, which Bob alluded to. That was a $52.5 million expenditure listing of all the federal grants that the city receives. And because the city receives and expends over over $500,000, which is the threshold to have the single audit, there's another set of accounting auditing standards that we follow, which is government auditing standards. So there's really 2 sets of auditing standards that we do follow, and you see that in our opinion. So we do go through that whole CFA with the schedule of expenditures of federal awards and identify which programs we're going to target this year to do an in-depth compliance test over. And this year we had seven major programs, which comprise about 27% of the total expenditures. We try to rotate these programs on an annual basis so we're not hitting the same ones every single year. So that process takes about 2 to 3 weeks to go through, because there could be information that comes out of that compliance audit that could impact the financial statement audit. And then once the city has all their funds ready, we get a trial balance for every fund. There's over 65 funds. And we have to go through a whole process to basically determine, are these funds major funds, non-major funds? We go through a whole assessment and risk assessment process. Materiality is going to be based on the significance of those funds, so you're not going to get basically the same paintbrush painted over every one. So, this fund could have a higher materiality, lower materiality. We got to go through that whole process, and then we basically start targeting based on our risk assessment approach. So it does take about 2 months for us to go through that process, which is now pushing us to later November. And we basically get the final document, the CAFR, which comes out to us about the week before Thanksgiving, and it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to go through that, to incorporate and make sure that all the disclosures and the financials are presented in accordance with GAAP.
You happen to... It's about 1,000 hours.
That's what I'm going to ask.
That with one breath.
It's a process. I'm going to put a timer on you.
I want to ask you about how many hours you put in each.
Well,
1,000 hours each?
It's over... The city of Glendale takes approximately 1,300 to 1,400 hours of our time.
Jeez.
And obviously, we have an agreement upon, the cost that we charge, which is, a cost that's not fully...
Do you get a monthly rate at one of our hotels? I mean, you're out here often enough.
Well, we're all pretty local, I guess, Southern California. So.
Okay, so you don't, late nights you're not spending in our hotels. You actually a conference room. Okay, well, that kind of clarifies if you just put a couple days in and go home.
No, it's a timely process.
So I assume that means you do quite a thorough job of analyzing the financial situation. You're also, of course, have all been board certified. You continue to have your auditing upgrades and have to study and so forth.
It's a requirement.
Yeah, it's a requirement. I'm sure you have errors and omissions insurance in case you make any mistake.
Right.
And I'm just saying that because sometimes people talk about the CAFR and talk about our accounting procedures, that somehow they're way out of the norm, that we're doing things here that just aren't right. I think these gentlemen would be the first to point out if something wasn't done properly.
Right, and because the city is always issuing debt on a recurring basis, we do assess this risk audit as a high-risk audit, which means we do have the second partner do a concurring review of the entire audit file, not just simply over the report. So, if the opinion we issue on the CAFR gets included in an official statement or other public document that really wasn't designed for those eyes to look at, investors, so forth, we have to go through a process. As a national firm, we have a pretty rigid process because that opinion, obviously has a lot of weight to it, so we just don't take that lightly.
And the CAFR will be included with a lot of
And that's
loan
why
documents.
we've seen that over
bond
time,
issues.
so we designed that as part of our planning process.
And you've done it for about 18 years, you said?
I've been in public accounting for 18.
How about you?
28 and a half years.
Only.
Mr. Najarian?
So you said the firm put in about 1,300 hours on this.
Approximately.
And that's one person. If there was one person working, it'd be about 7 or 8 months of work.
It's a whole team of...
Monday through Friday. But for a single man hour, a single individual working, it would be about that long. And what were your charges for this? Do you know offhand?
Go back and look at the most recent, we call it the WIP, work in process. That's kind of our internal time
Give me a
system.
ballpark.
Probably close to 300,000 of our...
No. How much did you charge, I think was the question.
Our fee, you mean? Or
Your fees.
About 145 this year.
So we
145,000.
get just under half realization if we took our standard billing rate times the hours that we put in. But this is an industry that we have consciously wanted to get into. It's during the summer. Although we do use specialized folks doing it, it's not in a traditional CPA busy season, so it's typically discounted work.
So is any amount of that fee contingent upon us getting a no observation report from you?
There's, in our arrangement letter and our agreement with the city, we do have some clauses if the city is not ready on a timely basis or if we encounter things outside the scope of our audit. And what we did encounter several years ago was with the whole stimulus funding, it increased the major program determination significantly. I think in the past it used to average anywhere from 2 to 3 major programs on an annual basis. With the stimulus, and the city got quite a bit, it pushed it up to between 6 to 8 on an annual basis. So we had to basically come back because it was not part of the original scope. So things like that. But if we come on a certain date when management says we're going to be ready and they're not ready, or we get schedules and PBC items to start our audit and they're not reconciled or agree to the trial balances, then those could be causes for us to come back and readjust the fee scenario. But
And we haven't found any of those.
And, just so we're clear about this, I want to carry on with what the mayor said. In reviewing this CAFR, do you find any items of the accounting reports that are deceptive?
Deceptive? No.
Deceptive
No.
is the word I hear sometimes around here. Misleading?
No.
Going to run out of adjectives.
Inaccurate?
No.
Okay, thank
We
you.
wouldn't put our opinion if we found any of those items.
Are there any other, Mr. Ochoa?
To punctuate one point that was made, I want to make sure that the council gets the answer that you were asking about. With respect to the activity of the electric fund, that activity, the transfers in particular, happen within the electric fund. Is that a fair statement? Anything that is nuanced as a part of the charter of the City of Glendale that happens below an accounting level, below that electrical fund level, isn't necessarily something that you would opine on?
our audit is not really designed because we're basically applying on the financial statements and that they're prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. If there's a question that comes up during the audit process relating to a legality type question, we do work closely with the city attorney's office because we're not attorneys. So we do look to the city attorney for an opinion if a question does come up.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear that the issue about which pocket in the same pair of jeans that the transfer might move from the electric fund, which is the accounting level designation that we use according to GAAP, as it moves to the general fund. That's what you're looking at, and that's what you have an unqualified opinion that it's being handled appropriately.
Right. We look to see, was the amount consistent with what was approved by council, which there's a resolution that does authorize that on an annual basis. And we look to make sure that it's not for some other purpose, which would be inconsistent with the way it's being reported. Right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion accept?
Yes. Move 8C 1 and 2.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Menuchyan,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next.
Next at 8D is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding status of GWP's activities to comply with state environmental mandates. D1 is a resolution approving the 2012 GWP Renewable Portfolio Standard Procurement Plan for Compliance, Period 1. D2 is a resolution authorizing execution of Phase 2 Renewable Project Agreement with the Southern California Public Power Authority in a not-to-exceed amount of $750,000. E3 is a motion authorizing execution of an agreement with Financial Engineering Associates, Inc. for the lease and maintenance of software for GWP for the purpose of evaluating the financial impacts of alternate renewable portfolios for a 3-year term in not-to-exceed amount of $300,000. At D4 is a resolution authorizing issuance of a request for proposal for consulting services associated with acquiring a new energy trading and risk management system in a not-to-exceed amount of $250,000. E5 is a motion to note and file report and directing staff to delay the report to council on AB 2514, energy storage analysis, until October 1, 2014.
Ochoa.
Yes, sir. We have a rather high-level report for you that we'd like to summarize with our Chief AGM, Mr. Lins, and of course Mr. Zern, as it relates to the mandates that the GWP operates under with respect to its renewable energy portfolio. So,
What's a high-level report?
a high-level review is a brief review that will get into as much detail as the City Council would like. Thanks.
Never heard that term.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Steve Lenz, Chief Assistant General Manager for Glendale Water and Power. And as you just heard, we've got 5 action items tonight related to GWP's compliance with state environmental mandates. And in conjunction with that, I'll talk a little bit about where we are with our renewables, and then I'll move into the 5 action items. On a chart on page 3, this shows a little bit about where we stand with our compliance obligations. This blue line at the top is an estimate of our retail load from 2011 to 2020, and that rises at about 0.5% a year. These lines below show what our obligation is for RPS, of renewables, in terms of percentage, and also in terms of megawatt hours per year, and I'll get to covering that short position in a moment. Here's a list of projects that we've developed with SCAPA up until now. We've got some geothermal, some wind, some small hydro. And just one thing I want to highlight on this page is that Grayson is our single largest renewable project, coming in at about 7.4%. So that's been a great resource for us. And we have an opportunity to actually squeeze another 3 or 4 megawatts out of that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Here's our generation portfolio. I just want to highlight a couple of items on this page. This is an estimate for calendar year 2012. We're looking at about 20.5% for calendar year 2012. We've got options for an additional 7.5% of wind out here if we choose to exercise those. And one thing to highlight here is there's a slice of pie here for large hydro, which is Hoover, which is 5%, which we used to count towards our renewables, and we no longer can. Last point to highlight here is you'll see coal in the estimate for 2012, calendar 2012, only 30%. We had a major fire at one of our coal projects, San Juan, and so that caused our coal output to go down for calendar 2012. Last year, we were around 36%. So this, the difference here between this blue line and the red line is basically the megawatt hours of renewable energy that we have to buy between now and 2020. And you can see around now we're above the blue line, so we're looking good through 2015, although we have to make up for a little bit of shortage in 2011. And then after that, we will go out and fill this gap here with short-term purchases and longer-term projects as well. So there is an action item for a procurement plan. That plan at this point in time focuses only on compliance period 1, which is 2011, 2012, and 2013. And because of our budget situation, we're focusing on using RECs, or renewable energy credits, to fill that gap for that short period. And we're taking our focus off of longer-term projects where we would have to put some capital up in these early years. And I'm not going to get into how we're going to fill that, meet that plan, but it deals with buckets of RECs to minimize cost to the customers of Glendale. The second action item is our second agreement with the Southern California Public Power Authority to develop further renewable energy resources. We had a first agreement with them that we signed in 2006. And we've spent about $430,000 in that process. We used that process to develop that list of resources I showed you in that prior slide. We are out of money in that process, and we now need to sign the next contract, and we're proposing to spend about $750,000 between now and 2020, which would be about $250,000 for next fiscal year. And that actually would include a look at repowering Grayson and increasing the output from that shoal gas in more efficient units. I'm not going to get into the detailed activities in the SCAPA contract except to say that we work with all of the SCAPA partners to hire professionals to investigate projects for us to participate in. These are some of the new projects that are on the table at SCAPA. Actually, these are the wind options that we already own, but we are looking at some geothermal in Imperial Valley. So once again, this is the additional landfill gas from Grayson that we're trying to get out of the ground. There's some geothermal in Nevada, some solar in California, and some biomass in Washington, which is related to paper pulp and burning some of that. This is just a quick overview of our system, and I like to show this. I don't expect you to be able to read it, but it shows how our system is spread across all of the western United States. And the green squares are generation. We've got generation up here in Wyoming, wind, and coal in Utah, and nuclear in Arizona. And these red lines are transmission lines that bring all of that energy home. So our whole strategy around renewables is finding projects close to those transmission lines so we don't have to build any new transmission or pay for any new transmission.
The point's well taken by Mr. Lenz that at the, I think when you talk to most of our customers, most of our residents, you need to talk about GWP generation. They're looking at Grayson and not having that full appreciation for a national Western infrastructure that we work through.
The third action item is a license with a software product called PowerWorks. And it basically is a portfolio modeling tool that's going to help us make all these decisions. How do we scale in renewables? How do we take care of the carbon? What's the best way to repower Grayson and dispatch Grayson? Looking at the whole system at one time. And that is going to be a 3-year contract, $300,000. We may be able to get rid of an existing product we're using for another purpose that's $75,000 a year. So the net additional cost would only be $25,000 a year. We've got to do some parallel testing to see if we can do that.
25 or 225? That was for 3 years?
Yeah, it's $300 for 3 years, so $100,000 a year. Okay. But we have a product we're already using for a portion of that that's $75,000 a year that we may be able to take care of with the new product. So we're hoping that the net will only be $25,000 a year. Finally, the last, not the last, but next to last action item is a new energy trading and risk management system. The one that we bought back in 2002. It's really not equipped to track all these renewable energy credits and the carbon allowances that we're having to trade. And it's also not really well equipped to transfer all this data to our new effort to more aggressively manage our risk management on the portfolio. And so we need that system to take care of this. Today, all we're asking is that you authorize an RFP. It says not to exceed $250,000, but the reality is all we're asking you to do is authorize the RFP. We'll come back with an award for whatever we think a reasonable amount is. And then finally,
will this system be tied into the people that trade the energy on real life?
yes, it will track all of their trading, and it also will easily transfer data to the finance group who's kind of overseeing the whole operation.
And Mr. Mayor, just to follow up on that, that's been one of my primary missions is in my initial tenure here is to look at the whole trading operation and shore up and kind of armorize our energy risk management operation.
So finally, in let me see here. Finally, in February 2012, Council approved a plan for us to go and look at energy storage options. And we were supposed to come back to you by October 2013. The law now allows us to go to October 2014. And at the same time, storage options are moving very slowly, and one of the focuses of the second SCAPA renewable agreement is going to be to look at those options, and we don't think we're going to be ready in October 2013. So this final item is just to delay that date till October 2014. And that is a very high-level overview of 5 action items. And if you'd like to go into detail on any of them, I'd be glad to.
Mr. Weaver.
I just have a question. I've done some reading, at least, on the wind sources. The environmentalists coming out of the woodwork, what you're doing to the creatures out there by having these wind farms, whatever. Do we foresee any of that impacting on where we have the wind farms? Or
I haven't heard of that impacting our wind farms yet.
What I'm talking about, though?
Yeah, I mean, we've got wind farms up in the Northwest and wind farms out in Wyoming, but I haven't heard of any kind
About
of
the solar?
wildlife mitigation impacting.
How about the solar? Same thing. We're
There's
putting
been-
out in the desert, and we're driving all the turtles and everything out.
Well, you know, we did have that. We brought you that one project, La Paz, which is that big, I don't
Yes.
remember, 2,400-foot smokestack or chimney that worked with convection. And that project actually died. And one of the issues they were looking at was the desert turtle, which they were going to have to deal with because they were covering a 3-mile diameter of.
There you go.
Wasn't the only reason, but it was an environmental consideration that they were looking at.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Weaver, there's been a lot.
I don't want the public to get the wrong idea. It wasn't a smokestack. It was a tower with mirrors.
There was no smoke coming out of it.
I apologize. It just looked like a smokestack, but it was basically just a big round tube that funneled hot air.
What's interesting, I think you've seen over the last probably 2 weeks, there have been several articles in various papers about different types of renewable, from solar in Hawaii, where they've overloaded the system and actually everybody has solar there, and so the utility's actually going broke because they aren't making any money, to some of these issues with the environmentalists on the wind and the attraction of bats and other birds. And solar in the desert as well. So, you know, these are things that I think as we get closer to that 33%, which I always call as money. I mean, this first 20%, you know, not that it was easy, not that it was cheap, but my sense is this next 13% to make that 33% mandate is going to be the tough road. It usually is when you're going for mandatory compliance and things like these to do that. So we'll have to watch these things. It's part of one of the software packages that are on our action items. It helps us model certain projects and certain types of energy that then provides us the best information to give to you or to recommend to you what project we should get involved in.
I'd hate to see you get to 32% and now struggle to get the.
We're going to get all the way. There's no question.
Well, I do want to say that I think GWP's done a great job, including Mr. Linz, in getting to that 20% renewables. And, of course, the portfolio itself is very varied, from winds to solar and small hydro, and, of course, the gas that we pump from the landfill to use at Grayson. And then our program for individual solar installations, a rebate that we've given. So I think we absolutely have done a good job. And, yeah, I agree with you. Well, one of the reasons it'll probably be more costly is that more and more cities and of course, the investor utilities are moving to renewables, and so there's a crunch of but it's certainly the right way to go. And I think Hawaii is interesting that, in fact, where of course they pay way more for electricity than anywhere else in the country, probably. The fact that so many people have taken to solar panels, and but anyway, all in all, I think GWP has done a great job. Mr. Najarian.
So one of the ironies about the state setting its renewable energy goal is that most of those sources are intermittent, and that we could invest a lot of money in wind farms and reliability on them, and solar. The problem is when the wind dies down or the clouds come in, they're not putting out, and we're going to have to build gas generating plants to make up for that shortfall at a second's notice. Sometimes they're going to have to be fired up instantaneously. So just so everyone knows, I mean, it feels good that we're going this way and the state's going that way, but I think the state is going to have a moment of reckoning when they set those standards, that they may want to rely a little bit more on the reliability of the traditional fossil fuel plants than the intermittent sources, which could leave us with blackouts and brownouts under the unfortunate set of circumstances.
Well, it gets very difficult to schedule that energy dynamically, and one of the ways we're dealing with it, because we're relatively small in the industry, is we pay someone to take that wind as it blows up in the northwest and give it to us on peak March through October. But we pay a good 25% premium on the energy to have them take care of that service, so it's significant.
On the other hand, if you build what are called peaker units, as we did here in at Grayson, and you use natural gas, you're eliminating an awful lot of coal-fired plants. So that combination, I think, works real well.
And Mr. Mayor, that's sort of a secondary goal. We're talking about the renewable mandate here, but we're also looking at ways that we can begin to wean ourselves off coal as well, and natural gas is looking like an obvious alternative to that.
And that includes a review of peakers at Grayson.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you.
I'll move 8D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Second.
Roll call.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next, please.
At AD is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding professional services agreement, PSA, for GWP electric rates and fee study. E1 is a motion authorizing execution of a PSA with Boris Metrics in an amount not to exceed $71,665.
And I'll move 8E1.
Second.
Comments? Roll call.
That was Councilmember Najarian seconded. Thank you.
71.
Council members: Friedman,
Yes.
Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes. Next.
This is oral communication portion. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. A speaker will be allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. City manager may approve the matter to the appropriate department for an investigation and a report.
Chinook Ramirez, followed by Herbert Milano.
Thank you very much. My vision is to restore America. I'd like to read an article from the LA Times dated August 24th, 2012. Immigration agents sue White House. 10 say that Obama orders to ease up on deportation efforts violate federal law. Washington. A small group of immigration agents is suing the Obama administration, saying that the agents should not be required to implement a program to grant work permits and halt the deportation of some young illegal immigrants. The lawsuit alleges that the program, as well as their directives issued last year that require U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers to use broader discretion in immigration cases, violates a 1996 federal law that requires federal agents to put people who entered the country unlawfully into deportation proceedings. The lawsuit filed by 10 ICE officers and agents on Thursday in federal court in Dallas allege that Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano and ICE Director John Morton have caused harm by issuing directives that the agents say forced them to violate their oaths of office. Starting August 15, some young undocumented immigrants have been able to file for 2-year waivers of deportation and work permits under a new Homeland Security Department policy called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Applicants must be under the age of 31 and have arrived in the U.S. before the age of 16, among other requirements. Those who meet the criteria but already in deportation proceedings can apply to halt those as well. The lawsuit filed Thursday is being funded by Numbers USA, a Virginia-based organization that advocates for lower immigration levels. We have officers who are under threat of losing their jobs and retirement if they refuse to use what we think are unlawful orders, said Chris Crane, president of National ICE Council, a union that represents approximately 7,300 ICE employees. Crane said that the one ICE officer was facing a 3-day suspension for trying to place a foreign national into deportation proceedings. No administration, Republican or Democrat, should ever order a federal law enforcement agent to violate a federal law, said Chris Kobach, a lawyer and Kansas Secretary of State who is representing the agents. Kobach wrote Arizona's controversial paper please law. So bravo to this individual. Again, see what these lovely individuals are going through just to stand on principle. And so I just like to say, I say deport, deport, deport. No amnesty, no asylum status. And I praise, I applaud, and the ICE agents, the DEA agents, the Honorable Governor of Arizona, Jan Brewer. Boy, this woman's got balls. And also the Honorable ex-Governor of California and ex-military Marine boy, Pete Wilson. I wish we had listened to them a long time ago. And ex-mayor of Costa Mesa, Alan Mansour, who took a brave and courageous stand against criminal illegal aliens and gangbangers. Goodness gracious, had we listened, I wouldn't be running from these gangbangers and illegals every day of my life. I say Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and Happy Kwanzaa to all my United States military veterans, including General David Petraeus and General John Allen and General Martin Dempsey and General Shinseki under Obama administration, and Chief Leon Panetta of Department of Defense, the top brass Pentagon officials, our military aviators, and our Joint Chief of Staffs, and to all our chopper pilots, sheriffs, police, and emergency crew, and to all our commercial airline pilots, and my beloved Gillespie, daredevil pilots extraordinaire. I swear to all of you in court, I also, the ex-mayor of Anaheim, Kurt Pringle, and the ex-councilwoman Lucille Kring of Anaheim, and Chief Welter of Anaheim Police Department. You know, God bless you. May the universe and all the gods and goddesses, may they bless you and your family and your colleagues and all your circle of love. May you be blessed with health, happiness, and prosperity for the year 2013. And I also say that to all of you, including Dave Weaver, who I believe is military. Bless you, sir. And Mayor Frank Quintero, who is also military. God bless you, military. You people have spit. I admire you and I love you. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor, Councilman Manukian, God bless you too, and you and your families.
Mr. Manukian is military too.
I'm
Army.
sorry.
Air Force. Air Force.
Air Force.
Thank you.
Oh, bless you for all that you've done for this country, and America will bless you back. God bless America. Thank you.
Herbert Milano.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Manukian, members of the City Council and City staff.
Sorry, I'm not Mayor Pro Tem. He just handed me the gavel.
Oh, he did?
Gets back.
Oh, I see. Very well.
So.
My name is Herbert Milano. I would like to address two topics, if I could. One of them is tangentially related to an item on the agenda, but I feel that it's significantly different that I can cover it now, unless Mr. Garcia stops me here. It has to do with the way the city looks at these financial reports. I'm referring to the budget versus the CAFR. come roughly April and May, you'll be spending many days discussing the city's budget, which is a futuristic objective as to where the city is and where the city has been, but for all intents and purposes, the real document that is audited and reflects what has transpired is the CAFR. And I was wondering why throughout the years, the City Council doesn't spend sufficient time going over the audited reports. You know, come January, come back and take a look at these reports and begin taking it apart, especially for the areas that are of significant impact to what eventually you'll have to tackle in the budget. So I was looking at items that I thought merit some consideration. Let me give you one: compensated absences. You have a liability of $26 million. You have a post-employment benefit recognized here, $38 million. And if you were to take a look at those two back 10 years, you'll find that they were significantly smaller. And so it's the same thing as you go along through many of the other fairly significant measures that oftentimes really require, I would say, a whole City Council session to discuss. Mr. Manukin, you mentioned a couple of them with regard to the unfunded liabilities. One is the post-employment, which is the post-employment benefit, and that is that medical expense that is underfunded. Now, there's zero assets on that. And you have, I forgot now the number, which is very large, like
191 million.
Pardon me?
191 million.
Yes, and if we were to look back at 6 years ago, I don't think there was anything there. So you look at the unfunded obligation of the pension system, and you say, how is that going to impact in real dollars the general fund in the future? Right now it's being impacted by about $30 million. And even though CalPERS was gracious enough to sort of like really extend and reduce the yearly impact, but if we have an obligation of $1.4 billion altogether, and we are guaranteeing like 7.5% return on this thing, I imagine that if they're only coming up with 1%, that difference has to be paid somehow, even though it may be amortized over a 30-year period. That's a very significant number that will impact the general fund in the future. So when you have, let's take these roughly 400 employees of police and fire, where they take up nearly 50% of the total obligation. After a while, you really are going to have very little money left over for capital improvements, for parks, for libraries, or anything, except police, fire, and pensions. That's it. There'll be no money left over for anything else. That's the reality that you're facing and the stuff that I've been talking about for a good, 6, 7 years. But now it's a reality. And I think that you guys are just not addressing it, not facing up to it. All right, so here's my second topic. It has to do with the Monroe's Chamber of Commerce presentation, where Mr. Najarian was present, and where you mentioned to the crowd present that the city had actually gone out and do an outreach to all these groups of business owners with regard to the development that was going to remove that parking lot right south of Honolulu, near Market and Broadview. And I don't recall there having been a public hearing on it. I never recall any of these shop owners and business owners coming to the city to voice their concerns. And yet it was presented during 3 times in 2009, and we did a public records request on it. And it is pretty significant to find out that the impact on these businesses would have been fairly huge, and yet there was no transparency made during that meeting. Anyway, my time's up. Thank you very much.
Alex Barstow.
Hello, my name is Alec Bertrosov, a lifelong Glendale resident. Some of you know why I'm here, some of you don't. I would like to know where the plastic bag ordinance is. As a recap, in October 25th, 2011, every single one of you voted to give $15,000 to a consultant to write the ordinance, an ordinance that mimics the LA County ordinance that was written and passed in 2010. These are the things that you guys had to say when you were voting for that motion. Mr. Manoukian, you said you would support the ordinance. You said you also support the 10-cent fee after Albertson's representative spoke. Ms. Friedman, you said you support the ordinance to its fullest extent. Mr. Najarian, you also voted for this. Mr. Quintero, you said you're 100% for it. Mr. Weaver, who I don't always agree with, even agreed with me on this one. People will learn to adapt to the new way of doing things. We've been inundated with emails and support. So what's happened to this ordinance? That wasn't the only opinion that was being addressed on that day. Mr. Steve Zern, who doesn't always get applause, got applause that day. He said, despite voluntary efforts, these bags continue to be a prevalent source of pollution, with litter on land getting into our storm drain system and our oceans, rivers, and lakes. He goes on to say, I wish you could see the landfill. There are actually full-time individuals who do nothing but pick up litter, most of this being plastic bags. We had a representative from Albertson say this is good for the community, good for business. We don't want to deal with patchwork from city to city. 12 people spoke in support of that ordinance. 2 people spoke against that day. So the community was jazzed up about this. We were very excited. The city was finally moving in the right direction. We participated in Day Without a Bag, which is an event that's done annually by Heal the Bay. We got 25 volunteers together December of that year, just a couple months later. We went to 8 different grocery stores addressing various community needs, different diverse constituents. We distributed 1,200 bags that day. And they all came with this flyer letting people know about the ordinance, that it's coming, what to expect, and who it affects. And we had a great turnout. We saw people that were using the bags coming out of the grocery store as we handed it to them. We found a lot of people were already using grocery bags. People were very excited about it. They wanted this to happen. It was happening, and people loved it. And we were so excited about it, and nothing has happened in the past 14 months. We went to Ralph's, we went to Rite Aid, we went to Vons, we went to Ranch Market. We tried to get Jones, but we didn't. We hope to do that this year. And this year, we plan to distribute 2,500 bags. We have at least 15 volunteers that are coming out this year. It's going to be next Thursday, December 20th. If you feel you need to reach out to the constituents, if you're worried about the backlash, come join us, talk to the constituents, let them know why you think this is a good idea. Since 2011, since you voted on that motion, LA County has done a report. They've seen in unincorporated areas a 94% reduction in single-use bags. This includes paper bags. Since 2011, Pasadena has passed their ordinance, and on that day, they had Ralph's and Food for Less giving free tote bags to everybody. The city of Los Angeles has passed their bag ordinance, and IKEA and Burbank was giving out free bags that day. And West Hollywood has passed their ordinance with the blessing of their Chamber of Commerce. This also saves us money. We all know the environmental benefits, but this saves us money too. You just recently passed $150,000 to install filters for the storm drains. A lot of it is to filter out plastic bags. We heard from Mr. Zern that there's full-time staff out at the landfill picking up plastic bags. This is a waste of money. San Jose did a report recently after they did their plastic bag ban. They've seen a 59% drop in street trash and an 89% drop in storm drain trash. This is real effects, real benefits. This is a picture of the Los Angeles River with trash in it after a storm. I'm going to be going to the Glendale River Narrows Park opening tomorrow. I'm hoping that we don't see something like this. All of the cities around us have done something about it except for the city of Glendale. So I'd be really disappointed to say to my friends that we're not doing anything about it, and I'm hoping that you can change that very soon. I'm embarrassed to say these are the bags out of my parents' house. It's a household of 4. We use bags for dog waste, kitchen waste, in the bathrooms. We use plastic bags. They use plastic bags for everything. After all of that, this is all extra. So what are we going to do with this? This is a big waste. Can I just wrap up? there's a lot of this going to waste, and we have the holidays coming up. There's going to be millions of transactions happening in Glendale, and if you had passed this earlier, you would have made a real big difference this year, but unfortunately you haven't. So we're hoping you'll take action. I'm putting in a public request for all of the reports that have been generated for this ordinance. I know that the consultants have generated the report, but you've chosen not to look at it yet, but I know the public is willing to see it, so I'll be putting this in the request, and there's copies for everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, might he not get an answer at the end of oral communications?
Yes, he will. Margaret Hammond, followed by Harry Zavos.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the City Council, staff, and audience, my friends out there. My name is Margaret Hammond. I haven't been here, I think after the last couple of times that I came, I was so disgusted, disappointed, demoralized, depressed, all the words that I finally found that I was making myself ill, and I decided I wasn't going to come. It didn't seem to do any good anyway, and I wasted my energy. But at any rate, then I turn around and I say to myself, I've lived here 54 years, and why do I continue to live in Glendale? Many reasons. Number one, for instance, the Casa Adobe, de San Rafael, having the luminaries, which are wonderful, Friday and Saturday night. If you haven't been there, it's absolutely beautiful. The doctor's house was open, what day did I work? Saturday, and will be open again this Saturday from 6 to 9. Beautiful, done in candlelight, Victorian tree, the whole thing. Wonderful things happen in Glendale. And the Riverwalk that I've waited many years for is opening. Now, the other thing that's very important is how many people say to me, the bulky item pickup. And it's free. Please call. We've got junk laying around the streets. And I think there are 4 TVs laying right now along the right-of-ways, down on Boynton and along that way. So I don't know what's supposed to happen to them, but, you know, they've been there for weeks. And, you know, there's a lot of things that we need to be grateful for. People say about, you know, the earthquakes. If you ever have, I have relatives that were hit by Sandy in Rockaway. They still have no heat. Now you can imagine in that area still having no heat. My niece was back there. She lives here now, and went back to help her in-laws who are up in their 80s. And the houses are red tagged and green tagged, and even the ones that are green tagged, she tells me, when she could finally get through to me, the mold is crawling up the walls, so who knows how long. So keep in mind, these are our fellow citizens, fellow Americans who need your help desperately. I mean, the FEMA and the insurance are bogging down on paying them. So they may lose their homes, they have nothing. How are they going to rebuild without help? You know, the other thing that is really wonderful is that we do have something in Glendale. It's Christmas decorations that we give awards, so to speak, for. So if you have neighbors, and down in my area there's lots of, doesn't have to be spectacular, just think of the thought that these people put into an effort to decorate their homes. There's a lot of really nice ones, and then there's some very simple ones. Please call 818-548-3700 and mention the address and the decorations, and they will get an award. Somebody is going up and down, but it does help if people that live in the area just make an effort to recognize that your neighbors do want to be part of the community. They do want you to feel good over the Christmas holidays. I know I keep saying this and I get sort of upset. I had a woman who went through a stop street this morning. Completely just drove. It was my turn, but she went. Luckily, I wasn't in a hurry. And that wasn't all. When she got to the corner of Chevy Chase and Boynton, there was a pedestrian crossing and she nearly hit him. And I went like, for what? I mean, how could you be in that much of a hurry that she could have hurt somebody that would have, their holidays would have been ruined? Now, listen, one thing here is cell numbers are going to go public this month. And my assistant's league, the league line, she printed in here the phone number. You will be charged for these calls from these marketing people. Remember that. So if you want to stop them from calling you, you call 888-382-1222. And that's the national do not call number, and it will be good for 5 years. So if you don't want to end up paying a big bill for listening to people you don't want to hear from, that is the number to call and take care of it. Okay, only at Christmas are spirits so bright. Only at Christmas do cares seem so light. Of each day we treasure God's blessing so dear. We could live Christmas each day of the year. May you all have a very nice Christmas with your families, and be safe New Year's, and see you in the next year. Bye.
Thank you, Margaret. Harry Zavos, followed by Sharon Wiseman.
Council, my name is Harry Zavos. The city's practice and position regarding GWP transfers for other than GWP uses is that the charter authorizes the transfers as a budget appropriation of the utility. I, on the other hand, have argued that the transfers can only come out of surplus, out of monies left over, if any, after all utility appropriations and needs have been met. I've quoted the charter transfer language, which provides that the transfers are to come out of the GWP surplus fund, which contains money, if any, left over after all utility needs have been met. I've quoted from the 1941 resolution initiating the charter transfer language, indicating where the council expressly stated a portion of the utilities surplus, should be used for the transfer. From that same resolution, I referred to the language that indicates that the transfers are to come from the surplus fund with the maximum amount, the portion, that could be transferred capped by an amount equal to a percentage of the utility's operating expenses. I've referred to earlier city budgets that describe the surplus fund as representing the excess of revenues over expenditures, and that this surplus fund is a source of the transfers. All of these references directly conflict with the city's position that the transfers can be a budgeted appropriation of the utility. The city has never come to grips with these conflicts, and it's never pointed to any charter provision expressly authorizing transfers to be a budgeted appropriation of the utility. The city position and practice is that transfers can go directly to the general fund that supports general services. On the other hand, I've argued that the transfers must go to the general reserve fund. I've quoted the charter transfer language expressly providing that the transfers are to go to the general reserve fund. I've referred to the language of the 1941 resolution that provides the same thing. I've pointed to earlier city budgets that show the transfer going to the general reserve fund, and from there, consistent with the charter, a given portion being transferred to the general fund that supports general services. All of these references conflict with the city's position and practice. The city has never publicly come to grips with these conflicts, nor has it pointed to any charter provision that expressly authorizes transfers to go directly to the fund that supports general services. The city now proposes an initiative that will allow transfers to be a budgeted appropriation of the utility, with the transfers going to the general fund that supports general services. Under our form of government, people have a right to vote on this issue, and how they vote shall be the law of the city. But they also have a right not to be misled as to what their vote means. The city has presented this initiative as merely streamlining and clarifying the existing charter and clearing up some ambiguities, as if a vote for the initiative will make no substantive changes. Unless the city can explain away the conflicts I've just presented, and unless it can point to specific language in the current charter expressly authorizing transfers to be budgeted appropriations that go directly to support general services, then continuing to present the initiative in this manner is at best misleading and at worst deceptive. And might I just add that listening to the auditors, apparently there is no impediment to doing transfers according to the charter, and no need to upgrade the charter in order to comply with those standards.
Sharon Wiseman.
Mayor Quintero, council members, staff, and those listening. I'm Sharon Weissman from far north Glendale, and I'm here to express my disappointment that the council is not considering a ban on single-use plastic bags tonight. Property owners in Los Angeles County recently received notice of a public hearing January 15th, 2013, on a Clean Water, Clean Beaches parcel tax to be added to property tax bills. While I think the proposed $54 per year for our single-family residential lot is a small price to pay to help the environment, many do not agree with me on that. Much of the trash currently flowing into our storm drains and ultimately into the ocean consists of these flimsy plastic bags. If the council had acted to ban them when a consultant was hired to draft an ordinance over a year ago, perhaps this tax wouldn't be necessary. It's always cheaper to not cause a problem rather than to clean it up later. These bags were banned some time ago in the unincorporated portions of LA County, the cities of Los Angeles, Pasadena, Long Beach, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, and many other jurisdictions throughout the state. Reusable grocery bags are easy to find and use and can be washed to avoid any contamination that might occur from leaking food packages. It's a shame Glendale chooses to ignore something that could make a positive difference for the planet. View protection suggested by the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council has been postponed until sometime next year. Leaf blower regulation, also requested by the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council back in March, has simply been ignored. I understand how difficult it is to work with a variety of opinions on difficult issues, but that's what you signed up to do when you ran for office. Please tackle these controversial issues sooner rather than later. They won't go away just because you don't deal with them. And since I guess I'm one of those crazy environmentalists, I wanted to point out it's tortoises that live in the desert that are threatened by the large solar array projects, and individual home solar systems like we have on our roof don't threaten the wildlife. Turtles are what live in bodies of water, and they're what are threatened by the plastic bags. So that's my little piece of education for tonight. And as to the development that was proposed a while back in Montrose, I know our homeowners in Crescenta Valley Community Association up there got a presentation by the potential developer, and there was pretty much universal disagreement. We didn't want it, and it went away. So I think in that case, the process worked, and I don't know how the business community weighed in, but at least the homeowners were not unhappy. And I know it's always difficult to balance environmental needs with economic needs, but please do consider both turtles and tortoises. And as an atheist, agnostic, secular humanist, free thinker, I just want to wish everybody Merry Solstice coming up, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Mnuchin,
Mr. Mayor, I do have to go. I want to thank everyone for coming. There's a number of motions that need to be read, and I know explanations given to a number of issues, but I want to take this opportunity to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and please be safe out there. Thank you very much, and we'll see you, everyone, next year.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Weaver?
It's been said by a couple people that we are deliberately not considering the plastic bag. Could Mr. Ochoa address why it's not on the agenda tonight that we have been working on?
Yes, sir, I'm happy to, and let me first apologize, because the reason why it's not on the agenda is entirely upon my shoulders. When this was approved by the council in fall of last year, you were getting into a season wherein you appointed a new city manager that had to come in and learn the organization, its strengths and weaknesses and everything else, which took a good chunk of that first half of the year. Shortly thereafter, the redevelopment agencies, I think my second week, the redevelopment agencies were dissolved, and we spent a good deal of time trying to figure out what we were going to do for an economic development program. Shortly thereafter, we learned that we had a $15.4 million general fund deficit, and that had to be plugged and dealt with, which led to the elimination of about 16% of our full-time staff. And so over the course of the spring and into the summer and even into the fall, as we executed the remaining pieces of our very severe reorganization, we have come to grips with the operational capabilities of this organization. At this point, we've gotten our sea legs. I believe we're at our fighting weight, and as the council has directed, as this is a priority for all of you, we were bringing this back. However, for this meeting, as was pointed out, so I suppose I do understand the frustration because it has been a long time, but at the same time, I guess we would beg the indulgence just a bit longer, because in wanting to do this right as opposed to twice, because we are using an EIR from another agency, in this case LA County, we need to have a program that effectively mirrors LA County's program, and it was brought up by council and it was brought up by other staff that if we had other alternatives that might want to be considered, ought that not be considered in the universe of the environmental review that was done. And as it turns out, if we do consider any real variation of that program, then we may very well have to do a brand new EIR. And I don't think anyone really wants to do the EIR because I think we know what it is that we're trying to achieve based on the direction that council had given previously. All that said, my humblest apologies for pushing this back to January 15th of 2013. I know one of the speakers was contacted last week on that very question. And again, I appreciate the patience of Job that it took to get to this point. However, it is coming, and sometimes things that are worthwhile take a while. If I may, Mr. Mayor, one other thing. I purposely tried to make sure that comments that staff certainly that we make aren't really focused on individuals. But in this case, one of our speakers here tonight seems to have wanted to embody and personify this debate with respect to the transfer. And it's interesting to me how the debate has evolved from first it was about Prop 218 and Prop 26, and then it really wasn't about that anymore after, in fact, the city attorney's office had given detailed legal opinion as to why we would disagree. And I couch it as disagree because I think that's an important, very salient point with respect to the intellectual honesty that is being portrayed in front of this council on this particular issue. Because ideas have been exchanged, and reasonable people, particularly people studied in civil law, can hopefully understand, certainly if they're teaching it, that people can honestly and respectfully and civilly disagree on a fact. We just see it different ways. That's where this original argument, disagreement even, started out. But there again, because the pressure was put on the city to justify its actions, the city attorney's office, aided by city clerk's office, continued to dig deeper as to what because the argument had migrated over to what the intent of the charter was and what the intent of the framers of that charter was, that argument started to mature even further, such that the city attorney's office was able to present the rationale, seemingly unquestioned rationale, as to why the transfer existed, how it could be used for the stated general government purposes of the city pursuant to or through the general fund, and that this was all well within the bounds and intent of the law. Last week, we then heard the latest permutation of the argument that somewhere in the early 80s, the characterization of this transfer changed. And that finally was the smoking gun that would demonstrate that what we are doing somehow, not only is it wrong, but that is the embodiment of the nefarious intent, presumably of a city council in 1982 or 83, and has somehow carried over to every subsequent city council since. In fact, the hours and hours of research that went into that proposition were then itself researched. That proposition was researched the following day. And last week, it was determined the reason why the characterization had changed in the budget was because the accounting standards at that time had in fact changed. The precursor to GASB, and I don't recall the acronym, Bob. Which one? The NCGA had dictated that we re-characterize how that transfer existed in our documentation. The transfer itself did not change, and what we have said consistently, the crux of this entire issue is that Mr. Zavos will say that the charter says that the transfer should come from the surplus fund. Our position has been that charter does say that. We do not dispute that the charter says that. What we will dispute, and what Mr. Zavos certainly will not acknowledge, is that the charter also says that the transfer will come from a percentage of operating revenue. And those two terms are wholly, completely in conflict. Those are the gross revenues, as defined, the gross revenues of the utility. And so at this point, considering all the historical documentation that the framers of the charter intended that a dividend, if you will, a general fund transfer would be used for governmental purposes for the operations of the city of Glendale, which in a general law city, for every general law city I've ever done a lot of work with, is going to be 2/3 public safety. And that's just you heard it here tonight as if it was some kind of aha moment, but in fact it generally is 2/3 public safety. But that transaction was created then for that stated purpose. It was reaffirmed in the 1940s, reaffirmed again in the late 70s, early 80s. And here we are today, arguing ad nauseum over something that reasonable people can disagree on and find an answer to. And I think from city attorney's perspective, certainly from city council's perspective, and I know speaking just for myself, that we have been extraordinarily open with the information and the interpretation, wanting to invite a real and honest discussion about what's going on. It isn't just about trying to win an argument. It's about trying to run an organization and manage a community. And some folks can sit in the cheap seats and take pot shots, but that doesn't actually deliver the milk at the end of the day.
Well, after that exposition, I assure you there'll be a new theory that'll be presented next week. So, on the issue of the bag ordinance, it is coming back January 15th. I think the speaker made an excellent presentation, including the fact that LA County is on in the right direction, Pasadena, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like we're exactly leading the charge here. We're just doing what everyone else is doing. Mr. Weaver.
Yeah, just a point of information on the LA River, since I worked on it for many years. The LA River is 52 miles in length. It's all concrete bottom except in one reach, the reach in the front of the city of Glendale. From about the 134 freeway where Verdugo Wash comes in, down to the Arroyo Seco. That's off bottom. Until the late 80s, that was always clear. Federal government provided operations and maintenance money to clear it because it was designed to be clear. If we ever get a 100-year event with all that vegetation in, it will overtop the levees. The water flows down, inlets, side drains come in, bringing rubbish. I've stood in it, walked through it. Bags, everything comes in. That water's moving at approximately 32 feet per second. If there's a few inches of water in there, it'll sweep you away. You cannot stand in water moving at that speed. Since the only area that is soft bottom and has vegetation, every bag comes in is moving, just like you would move if you were in that water. It goes down into the vegetation, and coagulates, and that's what you saw in that photo, all of it from 20, 30 miles upstream coming down and coagulating in the brush there. Just wanted to say that, if it's below there, you won't see it.
And by the way, who is the Corps of Engineers, or who's responsible for cleaning that riverbed?
The Corps of Engineers.
Corps is, huh?
Corps of Engineers, but the O&M budget of the federal government was cut many, many years ago, because I handled all the operational maintenance. And they cut it, eliminated it, so we had to stop clearing it. Now you see beautiful trees.
So you're actually responsible for that trash there in
clearing
that
it. I put out contracts every other year. But
First, I want to thank Sharon Weissman for explaining that people in the north part of the city did know about that proposed housing project. I know Mr. Milano doesn't live in the city, so he may not always be aware of these things, but it was definitely transparency, and the community made their position known, and the council responded, and the project didn't go forward, which is why there was no public hearing at the city council level. So I agree with you that the process did work. I would be in favor of allowing us to talk about the closed session hearing to discuss that project if my colleagues want. I have no problem talking about my position on it and how I voted. So I would leave that up to my colleagues if anybody is interested. In terms of the plastic bag ordinance, I honestly don't understand why we have to pause to study other alternatives. I think that we discussed what we wanted to do, and I don't know what other alternatives, why we would be discussing any other alternatives and doing anything different. I think it's very frustrating to the activists who have been working on this to go out and rally people and get people agreeing to come here tonight and then within 1 week cancel the meeting. I personally am really, I'm sorry that that happened. And so I want to, I didn't know about it until I heard about it, that it had been canceled from everyone else. But if I had had anything to do with it, I wouldn't have supported that. I would have done it tonight as we had told the community we were going to do it tonight. I wouldn't have been interested in looking at other alternatives. I would like to just hear the ordinance as we discussed it last time, have it be presented to us, and vote for it or against it. I think we should talk about leaf blowers at some point. It's one of those issues that I get emails from on a pretty consistent basis. I think it's something that will take a while to put together. I think it's something that will take a while to reach out to different stakeholders, and I assume that the idea is to talk about banning the gas leaf blowers and making people use ones that are not so polluting, as I think other cities have done. And every now and then, I think it's air quality of California offers really inexpensive leaf blowers that are electric powered, so there's not that much excuse that it's inaffordable, because I think it's less money to buy one of those than to buy the gasoline ones. I don't know if they're quieter. I think that they are a lot quieter, but I get a lot of noise complaints about the leaf blowers, and I know they start in my neighborhood at about 6:30 in the morning, which is just obnoxious. So at some point, I would love, if someone's willing to second it, that when we have time, we take this up.
we've had those discussions in the past.
We may have. I haven't been here since when we've had them, so I don't know what happened in the past with them.
Still are out
Anyway,
there.
that's we don't have to make that decision now, but that's just my feeling. And lastly, I just want to wish everybody a very happy holiday and a safe new year. We're going to not be here for council between them. We'll be here for the agency meetings and during the day, so you'll see us again. But if you only watch at night and you don't see us again, I just hope that you have a nice, relaxing, and hopefully a good family time over the holidays.
I am sorry that the plastic bag ordinance did not go forward. However, I think that the reason that it is not going forward is for good cause. Not included was any, as I understand, not any discussion of the biodegradable bags, which are in use in Seattle and in Portland and in some Canadian cities. These are single use, but they are biodegradable. I am not happy necessarily with giving everyone a synthetic bag that does not recycle, that needs to be washed, and washing takes energy and water, that's manufactured in China, that comes over in diesel, low quality diesel fuel freighters. Let's get the alternative, which is those biodegradable bags, and let us be the leader. Let's not say we're not going to be the leader. Let's be the leader and say we're going to implement these types of bags which are safe for the environment, which do biodegrade, and which serve the purposes that many people have. And I use those bags all the time, and I'll buy some of those bags off your parents, Alec. I use them all the time. I'm hoarding my supply because I use them for everything. But I think when we bring this to the community, let's have all the options available and make it a good ordinance, and let's be the leader. Let's say that Glendale is implementing the biodegradable bag, whether it's inconvenient for the grocery stores to stock them or not, but let's at least have that information when we discuss it.
It's my understanding that the biodegradable isn't really biodegradable, but you've gone far enough.
But we'll find out about it. I mean, let's include that. That's
Mr.
fine.
Garcia?
Okay, we have new business?
There's actually successor agency meeting that needs to...
There's new business on that, too. Can I just briefly address the issue that Mr. Ochoa was touching on? And I think it's important to, the council knows this, but for everybody to know, including the public, that we've addressed all those issues that were addressed by Mr. Zavos point by point in memorandum form, before the GOE Commission, and 2 or 3 times before the City Council. He disagrees, obviously, but to say that we haven't addressed them, I think, is not being intellectual, is a little disingenuous. Second, I've noticed that the argument has changed somewhat, whereas originally it was that the transfer could only be made from net revenue, surplus revenue. Now it has to come out of surplus fund, but it can be up to the cap of 25% of operating revenue. I think that's a crucial distinction. If we were doing the accounting wrong, all that would change is we'd have to do the accounting as has been suggested, but the amount of the transfer would still be the same. So we would get a qualified opinion letter from an auditor, but the transfer amount would still be the same. And I think that's a crucial distinction that we shouldn't lose sight of.
All right, the successor. Well, first we have some new business.
Yes.
Is there new business on?
Yeah, there's 3
Yes,
items.
there is. I'll read it now if that's okay. I'd like to move that the successor agency, General Counsel, be and hereby is authorized to initiate legal action in the Sacramento Superior Court on behalf of the successor agency as it pertains to ensuring the proper distribution of real property tax fund monies as required by AB 1484. The case name and other particulars are unspecified as to the successor agency may join with other agencies who are seeking similar relief. The names of the defendants and other particulars shall be disclosed as required by law. General Counsel is further authorized to incur any and all expenses necessary in connection with said matter.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmembers Friedman?
Yes.
Manukian? Najarian?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Quintero?
Yes.
Need to adjourn that meeting. Was it a joint meeting already?
No, that one was not.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Successor agency.
Second.
We have adjourned the successor agency.
Now, Mr. Mayor, I have a couple. I'd like to move that city attorney be and hereby is authorized to initiate legal proceedings in Superior Court. The name of the proceedings, the defendants, and the nature of the action shall be discussed to any person upon inquiry once the action has commenced. City attorney is further authorized to incur any and all expenses necessary in connection with said matter.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmembers Friedman?
Yes.
Manukian? Najarian?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Quintero?
Yes.
And I would like to move the city attorney is authorized to compromise and settle the pre-litigation claim filed against the city of Glendale by Vito Artukovich and Son, Inc., /Vitomar, Inc., a joint venture filed in the Diedrich Reservoir Backup Pipeline Project Specifications 3380, contract number C105050. The Director of Finance is authorized to issue a warrant in the amount of $300,000 for delivery by the city attorney upon execution by the claimant of a properly executed release.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmembers Friedman?
Yes.
Manukian? Najarian?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Mayor Quintero?
Yes.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I don't want to do more.
Okay. We are adjourned.
Too much.
loaded lots of toys and goodies.